Chapter 1071. Sitting on the throne in the Forbidden Palace, Azhara's face lost all its color. "It's over," she murmured. "Everything is over." Azhara's maids screamed wildly around her. The queen held an empty wine glass in her hand, unwilling to believe what had happened. She was Azhara, the brightest light. She was the light, and the light was her. She was her, the supreme ruler of her people. Even though she knew that destruction was right in front of her, she still stubbornly told herself that she would never allow such a thing to happen. Sargeras refused to marry her. She was just a pitiful creature that was abandoned after being used. Perhaps many of her followers saw this humiliating scene, but she still didn't want to admit to them that she was wrong. She abandoned her people, and in the end, she was abandoned by the god that she worshipped. How ironic was this? How bitter was this? The rumbling sound of destruction grew louder and louder. The palace, which had sunk to the bottom of the water, began to be shrouded in darkness. Even the night elves' dark vision couldn't see through it. The only light in the palace came from the violent power of the Well of Eternity. The dark lake water began to surge into the palace, washing away her two maids. The maids let out shrill screams and quickly disappeared into the lake water. "I am Azhara," the queen muttered in her heart, her expression still cold. She cast a spell, and a magic shield suddenly appeared around her and the living maid beside her. "My wish is the highest." She used her powerful magic to block the lake water, but as the water got deeper, the pressure on the magic shield increased. Azhara's brows furrowed, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. This was the first time in her life that she had sweated. At this moment, the familiar and disgusted voice in the darkness whispered to her. "We have a way to make you stronger, stronger than before. We can help you." The queen wasn't stupid at all. Especially when a woman had just woken up from a dream of love, this woman was definitely at the smartest moment of her life. She knew that her shield wouldn't last long. Soon, the cold water would swallow her and her followers, and the glory of Azhara City would disappear from this world forever. The silver-haired elf queen nodded. "Ah!" Accompanied by a scream, the glass fell from her hand. Pain shot through her body. She felt her limbs twisting and entwining. She could also feel her back turning into liquid, as if it had suddenly melted. Her magic shield was obliterated. Azhara screamed in despair as she was drowned by the lake water. She could also hear other people's voices coming from the depths of the lake. Her maids, her guards, and other highborn elves who still served her. The lake water quickly filled her lungs, but she did not drown. Riding Alexstrasza, Duque watched from the sidelines as the city that symbolized the highest arcane civilization of the Night Elves was sucked into the center of the giant whirlpool. Duque didn't know whether he was following history or changing it. For a moment, he even had the mischievous thought that if Azhara City could be blown into pieces before it sank to the bottom, a new masterpiece would be born. Unfortunately, since he dared to attract the ancient gods and even used Queen Azhara to trick Sargeras, then the ancient gods that joined him, such as Enzos, would definitely not let Queen Azhara and her followers go. It was very likely that after a few centuries, a new horror would be born under the sea. Duque shifted his gaze away from the center of the Well of Eternity. Witnessing the standard world-shattering disaster quickly dissipate in all directions, Lin Feng's eyes widened in shock. Large pieces of land on the ancient Kalimdor continent were still being pulled into the lake, and the power of the horrifying scene didn't diminish at all. It looked like a domino effect. The land kept falling, and the horizon kept expanding. The only fortunate thing was that because the Burning Legion was massacring with Azhara City as the center, all the creatures in the vicinity had basically run away. Otherwise, it would have been another large-scale massacre, and Duque might have felt a little guilty. What a pity! Mountains were uprooted one after another. Large tracts of land split open in the raging whirlpool, and then disappeared into the center of the whirlpool. Sitting on the red dragon queen and looking down, Duque saw the land where the elves lived disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye. No power could withstand the destructive impact of the Well of Eternity. Perhaps to nature, even the bloody massacre of the Burning Legion was nothing. After all, what the Burning Legion did couldn't compare to what was happening now. Beyond his reach, the wheel of history still followed its inherent inertia and continued to move forward. Without the influence of external forces, everything was inevitable. A red dragon approached his queen at high speed. Ronan sat on a red dragon and waved his arms vigorously. Seeing that his master was safe and sound, he was very excited. "Do, Master Kong." Ronan, who was still very innocent, almost let it slip. Duque rolled his eyes at him. A few more dragons came over. Grom clearly saw Duque, and then, humph. He snorted and turned his head away. No one knew if he was sulking because he couldn't repay the favor, or if it was something else. Krasus also came with a smile. On the other hand, Vanessa, the maid with a belly full of evil tricks, didn't say anything, but when Duke looked at her. This bad maid, who often challenged her master in all sorts of ways, looked at Tyrande in Duque's arms. Her face was full of mockery, and she actually mouthed a few words to Duque: bird, beast, male, baron. No, no, no. The wind must be too strong, and my eyes must be playing tricks on me. Confess and be lenient, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. As an honest and reliable young master, how could Dumoke admit to such a thing? It must be an illusion. This is definitely the world's fault. Ha ha ha. In the distance, the outline of Mount Hyjal appeared on the horizon. Looking down from the sky, Duque could see the main force of the Night Elves moving toward Mount Hyjal. Their blue-purple figures were easy to recognize. Behind them, the waves of destruction were still far behind them, seemingly chasing them closely. Tyrande suddenly became nervous. She asked Duque, "My compatriots, will they escape?" Duque looked at the ground, and the system elf quickly compared the surrounding environment with the geography of 10,000 years in the future. If he didn't make a mistake, this would already be the territory of Duroder in the future. Fraud Duque was very sure, "It's okay, the disaster won't reach here." Chapter 1072. Duque's words sounded more like some sort of subconscious comfort, but Tyrande believed him without a doubt. Tyrande no longer had any doubts about Duke's abilities as he was able to teleport the two of them back before the Burning Legion's 3 leaders could regain their senses and go on a rampage. If Duque said it was fine, then it was fine. Her heart, which had just started to waver, quickly calmed down. Mount Hyjal was getting closer and closer. As another base of the Night Elves' nature faction, Tyrande felt reassured every time she came to Mount Hyjal. Suddenly, Tyrande heard the goddess's voice. "My child, you've worked hard. Can I trouble you to persuade your companion to come to Mount Hyjal?" Tyrande hesitated when she heard this. She had heard from Malfurion about a few mysterious powerhouses. Including Dukong beside him, there were a total of 3 humans. These were humans who were completely different from the humans of Kalimdor. They were powerful, mysterious, proficient in all kinds of spells, and had battle techniques that even the best night elf thieves could not master. No one knew where they came from. When they were dealing with the Burning Legion, they obviously had a common goal and naturally formed an alliance. But what about after that? "Goddess Elun is looking for you?" Duque suddenly asked Tyrande after sensing the goddess's power. "Yes, if you don't mind, the goddess hopes that you can go to Mount Hyjal." Tyrande asked carefully. In her days, she seemed to have become that helpless slave girl again. Duque laughed. "Ha! Just nice, I also have something to ask Goddess Elun for help." Since both sides had the same wish, it was easy. Tyrande heaved a sigh of relief and continued to sit behind Duque. She hugged Duque's waist and pressed her Mount Hyjal against Duque's back, just like she had done in those days when she needed comfort the most. Unbeknownst to Tyrande, a few hundred meters behind her, a pair of brothers were staring at her from atop two dragons. Illidan shouted in his heart. No! It can't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Tyrande is mine. At the very least, she would be Malfurion's. How could a jerk suddenly appear and take her away? These voices lingered in Illidan's mind, telling him of the unimaginable. Yes, there was a time when he was jealous of his brother, but he couldn't imagine doing anything that would hurt Malfurion, such as cutting off his left arm. But at such a time, he could not control his thoughts, and felt that this unthinkable thought of his was somehow a comfort to him. If the one who stole Tyrande was her brother, at least the pain of losing her would be slightly alleviated. Deep in his heart, Illidan still hoped that Tyrande would turn back and abandon the human spy who had once served Kil'jaeden. Perhaps there was still a glimmer of hope. Given time, Tyrande would realize that the two of them were more outstanding than the infernal affairs, and he was more outstanding than his elder brother. Perhaps to many couples, Tyrande's current actions were undoubtedly the greatest betrayal of their feelings. Perhaps, many men would turn their love into hate because of this. But at this moment, Illidan, who was wearing a green turban, and his elder brother, Malfurion, who was wearing the traditional green hat of the Druids, looked at each other and saw that they did not regret their choice. Of course, he chose to forgive her. Yes. As childhood sweethearts, this was an inevitable choice. However, compared to his elder brother who was prepared to do nothing, Illidan had a more radical approach. He secretly pinched his chest, where there were a few bottles of well water from the Well of Eternity. This was not the water that flowed into the magic vein and was diluted by the river water. This was the purest well water from the forbidden palace of Azhara. If I do something like this, Tyrande will definitely look at me differently, Illidan silently told himself. Dragons were the fastest flying creatures in this era. Not long after, the 4 dragon kings arrived at the peak of Mount Hyjal. It was only when the magnificent temple of the Moon Lady entered her vision that Tyrande realized that she had returned to her own life. That's right. Unless the goddess changed her mind, she would once again become the beautiful high priestess of the temple of the Moon Lady that countless people looked up to and worshipped. Tyrande, high priestess. Tyrande could already hear the cheers of the Elun sisters below. She awkwardly shifted to keep her distance from Duque and waved to the sisters. As they got closer and closer to the ground, Tyrande subconsciously felt a little timid. She had no idea how to tell her sisters about her experiences over the past few days. She did not know what the goddess of Elun had told her sisters, but it seemed that the sisters did not have a bad impression of her because she had been captured by the demons. Instead, their eyes were filled with fanatical worship. Tyrande did not have time to ask, because after she and Duque were put down, the 4 dragon kings quickly transformed into their human forms. They urgently needed a meeting to understand the situation of the Burning Legion. Alexstrasza walked at the front, followed by the 3 dragon kings, Duque, and finally Tyrande, Ronan, and the other transmigrators who walked behind Duque. Many ancient dragons also turned into human forms and guarded the perimeter of the Temple of the Moon Lady, preventing anyone from getting close. It was originally still daytime. The moment Elun's will descended, the sky above the central hall of the Moon God Temple turned from day to night. As the bright moonlight filled the entire hall, Duque could feel the will of the goddess turning into a large ball of gentle light that enveloped him. Hello. Expert from another world, may I ask what name I should use to address you? Infernal Affairs? Or Mr. Dukong? Elun's voice was gentle, and it was easy to associate her with the role of a mother. Duque bowed and replied respectfully, a name is just a code. We have our own difficulties that we cannot tell you our real names, please forgive us. So if possible, please call me by my fake name, Dukong. Alright, Dukong. First of all, thank you and your friends for choosing the side of Azeroth in this war. We thank you on behalf of the billions of lives in Azeroth. An illusory white humanoid woman covered in white light appeared, looking like a marshmallow. But there was no doubt that it contained Elun's will. Elun bowed to Duque. Not only her, but the 4 dragon kings, including Alexstrasza, also bowed to Duque. Chapter 1073. This, Ronan was a little incoherent, Krasus was extremely excited, and even Lord Howl was a little embarrassed. Vanessa quietly took a step to the left and hid behind Duque, deliberately letting all the glory fall on Duque. Only Duque, the one and only Duque in the world, calmly accepted all of this under Tyrann's surprised gaze. Duque did not think that there was anything wrong with this. After all, in the game, he was the man who had killed the true god Xiaofan and held the chicken drumstick Atish. This was a habit that transmigrators naturally developed, and when faced with a grand occasion, it seemed more imposing and imposing. This was a gift from a true god and 4 demigods. Tyrant covered her mouth in shock. Duque did not know that because of his unintentional action, Elun and the 4 dragon kings had a higher opinion of Duque. After all, if Duque was the kind of person who relied purely on scheming to ruin the Burning Legion, he would not be worthy of their heartfelt respect. But if he was a true hero who dared to bet his life and soul, fight for the world, and suffer all kinds of humiliation to finally drive away the enemy, it was a completely different matter. An existence with this kind of spirit was worthy of being worshipped by everyone no matter where they went. Phew! Elun admired Duque very much. After letting out a light breath, she said in a very calm tone, "The other beings in the world of Azeroth and I would like to know what happened in the Twisted Nether. My child Tyrant will not hide anything from me. But we would like to know the process from your point of view." Duque tilted his head slightly. "Let me be clear. I am referring to you letting go of part of your spiritual world, and not just repeating it verbally. We have no intention of prying into your privacy, and we also know that this is very rude. In exchange, you can also state your request in advance, and we will do our best to satisfy you." Alexstrasza also chimed in. "Please do not treat this as a transaction. As a token of appreciation for your help in Azeroth, we have prepared a big gift for you. Let me stress that this is a friendly exchange. It's just that if you're willing to show us your memories, we'll give you more generous gifts. If you agree, we can give you as much as we can." As soon as she finished speaking, the 4 dragon kings took out the gifts they had secretly prepared and placed them on their palms. Every item was priceless. There were equipment and tools. For example, the Red Dragon Queen pulled out a translucent, illusory list for Duque to choose from. "I agree," Duque replied. "But before that, I would like to change my request to everyone." The moonlight avatar of Elun made a "please" gesture. "Lady Alexstrasza, I want your life blessing. Bestow upon the 5 of us that we can control with our own will and possess powerful regenerative abilities." "Sure. Master Maligos, I want copies of all the magic manuscripts of the 5 elements, fire, frost, arcane, light, and darkness." "Yes. Sir Isra, I want to construct the principles and tactics of the dream world." "No problem. Sir Nozdormu, I want a..." At this point, Duque suddenly switched to the Draconic language, which was even more ancient. This shocked everyone present. Nozdormu nodded. "Lastly, Goddess Elun. My request will be made after I show you my memories." With that, Duque opened up his mind and showed Elun and the 4 dragon kings what he had seen and heard in Azeroth 10,000 years ago. However, Duque cleverly divided his mind into layers. He only showed them what they wanted to know on the outermost layer. Everything that involved his privacy was blurry and dark. There wasn't even any sound. Tyrant, who was standing behind Duke, had also entered the dreamscape that Isra had created for her. She watched the video, and her heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally calmed down. If even the bits and pieces of that ridiculous period were shown without reservation, it would be a shameful play and the cruelest public execution. If this was shown, Tyrant would probably have no choice but to commit suicide. Duque's display also made the few big shots in Azeroth smile bitterly. They began to understand why Duque could actually hide from those demons who were good at playing with people's hearts and prying into their souls. Of course, they understood what they wanted to know, but they didn't miss out on anything else. In order to trick the Burning Legion, Elun did not hesitate to lose a high priest. Now it seemed that Elun had profited greatly from this matter. Of course, the temporary death of her husband, Malorn, was another matter. In the dream world outside of Duque's perception, Elun, the 4 dragon kings, and the demigod Cenarius, who had not made it back in time, were having a small meeting. Can it be trusted? Malygos asked impatiently. Among so many big shots, he was the one who suffered the most. Not only did he hate Nisario, but he also hated the Burning Legion. At this point in time, he was already so paranoid that he was going crazy. When he had the time to go find his recently dead wife, Syndagosa, and touch her resentment, he should have fallen into madness just like in history. 5 billion demons. 450 void lords. Such an exaggerated battle record, I almost thought it was fake. Nozdormu smiled bitterly. Duque's system elf's detection was the best in terms of the living, but in terms of detecting spirits, it was inferior to these gods and demigods. He also didn't know that he had done such an exaggerated job. Hee. Did you guys sense Sargeraz's unwilling will wandering outside the planet's space barrier? Alexstrasza laughed. It's true. Elun made the final decision, and the other demigods no longer had any objections. After leaving the Dream World conference room, Elun immediately announced the results. Not to mention Ronan and the others, even Duque was dumbfounded when he heard this number. That much? Isra, who had his eyes closed, broadcast the voice of the soul that was wandering in outer space. It was President Sargeraz's roar. Infernal affairs. You bastard. I won't let you go. Don't let me catch you. The boring threat behind was cut off by Isra. Isra smiled. How is it? Mr. Dukong, do you need protection? Azeroth welcomes you. Elun let out a long sigh of relief. Such a huge loss, the Burning Legion will not dare to come for at least 10,000 years. Well done. Mr. Dukong. Please tell me how you want me to reward you. Chapter 1074. Duque looked up at Elun. First, please help me cleanse the toxins in my body, as well as the contaminants in my soul. Dark energy. Darkness. 7 sins. None of them were easy to deal with. These powers were like drugs. Once touched, there would be no good ending. Especially the impurities in the soul. If there was no way to get rid of them, they would unknowingly fall into destruction and depravity. Duke didn't want to go overboard and become the villain. After all, he had personally blocked the path of the Burning Legion. Being a villain in Azeroth didn't have a good ending. Elun's blurry face showed a look of relief. The next second, a miracle descended from the sky. Countless night elves saw the bright moonlight that descended during the day, and knelt down to worship, chanting the name of the goddess of Elun. The gentle moonlight seeped into Duque's skin and entered his body through his pores. It then gathered in his meridians, forming a seemingly gentle but actually turbulent current. It began to cleanse the impurities and evil substances in Duque's body. Blarg. Duque suddenly made a retching motion. Tyrant was quick to react. She quickly pulled the silver basin from the statue in the hall and placed it in front of Duque. Duque could no longer control himself and vomited. Blarg. Blarg. It was as if he was vomiting sesame paste. Not just from his mouth, but from his nose and eye sockets as well. Black substances were also gushing out. That feeling of suffocation was 100 times worse than vomiting after drinking too much. Duque knelt down on the spot. Tyrant held the basin in one hand and patted Duque's back with the other to make Duque more comfortable. It was a terrible feeling. Not only was his body hollowed out, but the evil impurities hidden in his bones and soul were all forcibly extracted. It was very painful, but after extracting the dark matter, he felt as if his bones had become lighter, and he felt as if he was floating in the air. Elun smiled. Go and rest for the night. Tomorrow, I'll help you convert the dark power in your body into the power of the shadow. Darkness and shadow might seem similar, but in reality, they were completely different in nature. Darkness symbolized evil and destruction. Shadow was merely a byproduct of light. Where there is light, there is shadow. Where there is day, there is night. Even the power of Elun, the moon goddess, essentially belonged to shades. This was because moonlight was merely the refraction of sunlight in the dark night. When Duque finally finished vomiting, he panted heavily and thanked him, "Thank you so much." Tyrant helped Duque down to rest. When Duque came back to his senses, he found himself in Tyrant's room. Looking around, it was simple and tidy. Apart from Elun's totem, it was filled with a scholarly aura. Tyrant fetched a tray of water and removed Duque's clothes. She then used the water and a cleansing spell to clean the dirt on Duque's face and body. For the sake of convenience, she even took off her priestess's robe. Duque suddenly said, "Will there be any gossip in your room? After all, you are the high priestess." Tyrant's face, which always carried a holy aura, was filled with a faint smile. "You say it as if you have not done anything to me." Ugh! The room suddenly fell into a silence that made Duque's balls ache. He suddenly smiled bitterly. Although before returning to the War of the Ancients 10,000 years ago, Duque had already noticed that Tyrant was acting strangely. She did not choose Malfurion as she did in the original history. Instead, she maintained a strange relationship with the Stormwind brothers, more than friends but not lovers. But Duque did not expect himself to be so thorough. He did not even give the Stormwind brothers a single chance. He did not know how Tyrant's enmity towards him 10,000 years later came about. He also did not know if what he was doing now was what he had once done to Tyrant in the original timeline 10,000 years later. In any case, it was now a bad debt. Sigh. When he was a spy, he would be exposed at any moment. He did not have the time to think about how to deal with their relationship in the future. Now that he had dealt with the Burning Legion, his nervousness and fear had subsided. How to deal with his relationship with Tyrant had become a huge problem. According to his agreement with Nozdormu, as long as the Burning Legion was defeated like in history, he would activate the teleportation portal within 3 days and send the transmigrators who were still alive back to 10,000 years in the future. Don't even think about bringing any living beings back. Nozdormu had repeatedly emphasized before he left. Duque bared his teeth. What should he do now? Just as Duque's thoughts were running wild, he suddenly felt a wave of sourness. Ugh! Duque was shocked to find that Tyrant had already started to attack Duque. No! You can't! Why? Tyrant raised her head and stared at Duque, her pure face blushing. Bastard! I didn't want to learn all this, but you forced me to. I'm just returning what you taught me to you. Teacher, her voice was long, like the pout of a young girl. It sounded soft and numb. Duque didn't have much moral integrity now, and after hearing these words, his brain directly crashed. Duque grinned maliciously, and directly began to turn from defense to offense, climbing Shanghajar Peak. He. If I don't teach you a lesson, you might really forget the days when you were controlled by my sword. Come. Let's fight. Humph, it was obvious that Tyrant had sensed that Duque was about to leave. She fought back fiercely and tried to find a way to counterattack. Unfortunately, she was still too inexperienced. She was defeated by Duque's sword within 300 moves. The sky brightened. When Duque got up, Tyron's back was facing him, but her shoulders were trembling. "Are you not going to say anything to me? Can't you just give me a title before leaving?" Duque did not know how to answer. After thinking for a while, he threw Nozdormu's warning into the twisting nether. "If I continue to stay here, my body and soul might collapse." The next moment, Tyrande was already in Duque's arms. She rubbed her tear-stained face against Duque's chest. "Will you come back?" Duque could not bear to see her like this. "If you are willing to wait for 10,000 years, after Duque said this, he felt that it was a shameful joke. Time and distance were the scariest poisons in the world of love. Before he had transmigrated, he had seen countless couples break up in less than a month. Furthermore, his relationship with Tyrande was not based on pure love. He did not know what Tyrande would think of him 10,000 years later. Was she enlightened? Had her love turned into hate? Was she filled with resentment? Or was it something else? He could not guess. Chapter 1075. Compared to the thousands of years of relationship he had with the Stormrage brothers, Duque's 1 month with Tyrande was like an instant. Expecting Tyrande to wait for him for 10,000 years? What was this? Back then, Wuxia had waited for him for 10 years, and he felt that it was a miracle. If miracles could happen so casually, it would not be a miracle. 10,000 years was the lifetime of most night elves, even for the long-lived night elves. Duque could not possibly tell them that they would obtain a new well of eternity, and that the world tree Nordrassil would ensure their eternal youth until the Battle of Mount Hyjal, right? 10,000 years sounded more like an eternal farewell. But Duque could not explain it. No, actually, Duque wanted to explain, but when he opened his mouth, he found that his throat was stuck by an invisible force. The system concluded that it was the power of time. Had Nozdormu regained control of time and space after 15 years in the Dark Portal? Bastard! Why did he come at this time? Why did he come at this time? Duque was furious. Clear tears gushed out from her eyes, converging into a small stream that slid down her elegant and pure face. What a long time. 3,600,000 lonely nights. Was it self-mockery? A bitter smile? Heartache? Or despair? Looking at Tyrande's face, Duque felt heartache for the first time. If he lost the 3 Windrunner sisters, Wuxia, or Jaina, he would probably feel the same way. Suddenly, he smiled bitterly. Duque decided to cheat. He first shook something, which Tyrande recognized. It was what Duque had asked for from Nozdormu. Then, she turned into her shadow form, and as if she was caressing it, she gestured on the white bedsheet. The black light did not disappear in an instant. Instead, it left behind an illusion of a black door that lasted for a full 3 seconds. Finally, Duque shrugged, as if to say, "I don't care if you believe it or not, I believe it." Tyrande was stunned at first, but then she seemed to understand. Duque did not know if she really understood or if she only half understood. What greeted him was a rain of kisses and a passion that was even hotter than fire. After the passion subsided, there was sorrow that could not be dissolved. Tyrande muttered unconsciously, "You despicable bastard, you turned me into this. 10,000 years is such a long time, how am I supposed to live alone? What if one day I suddenly really want to, what should I do?" He happened to see a few bananas on a fruit platter not far away from him. Duque's bad taste suddenly flared up again. Huh. Why is it, again? Alright, please don't mind these details. Duque unsheathed the Duque divine sword and showed Tyrande a spell. Alright, please learn this spell. The spell was very simple. It was a variant of evocation magic. Tyrant was now a combination of a priestess and a hunter. This level of magic was nothing to her. The key was the effect of the spell. That bastard Duque had instantly shaped the bananas into the shape of the Duque divine sword. He used it as soon as he said it. Tyrant almost broke down on the spot. You. She could not continue after saying the word, you, 3 times. Very well, my student, please do your best to learn the most important spell that I will teach you. Duke earnestly instructed. Wu, first, you have to restore its appearance. Then its strength and toughness. Finally, you have to restore its domineering characteristics. Think about it. Those terrifying days when you were dominated by the divine sword. Teacher Duque sang loudly. Tyrant's face was so red that it seemed as if blood would drip from it. But, she still learned it seriously under Teacher Duque's coercion. After settling everything, Duque stood on the balcony. His naughty face faced the sky at a 45-degree angle, and a tear rolled down his cheek. Teacher Duque praised himself in his heart. Ah! Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame me. As a restorer of history, I have to accurately restore history on the shoulders of the Lord of Time, Nozdormu. All right. My last historical restoration mission in this era, air-dried banana, has been completed. Behind him, Tyrant seemed to have sensed something and roared, Du Kong, you bastard. In the morning, he once again went to the moon goddess's temple. This time, Elun met Duque alone. Tyrant was the only one by his side. The moonlight once again appeared in the day, gently nourishing every single magic circuit in Duque's body. Yesterday, after his body had been cleansed of the impurities, it was not that obvious. Today, with the power of the moon goddess, Duque was pleasantly surprised to confirm that the curse that bastard Archimond had given him had finally been removed. As expected, the curse of a demigod demon was best dealt with by a true god. Duque gently raised his hand, and a dozen elemental light orbs flew out of his palm. The 3 arcane energy orbs of fire, ice, and arcane magic disintegrated, reassembled, and disintegrated again in mid-air. Duque's mastery of elemental energy left Tyrant dumbfounded. So you're a mage? Ha ha ha. Sorry. I was injured and cursed, and my magic circuits were thrown into chaos. My abilities as a mage were completely sealed. Thank you, Goddess Elun, for your help. Without you, I would have been a priestess for the rest of my life. Humph. Isn't being a priestess good? Tyrant was a little petulant. Not really. Do I have to tell you that every healer in my world has the heart to deal damage? Elun looked at Tyrant, who was like her own child, teasing Duque, and suddenly felt very comforted. If she forced Tyrant to sacrifice herself and ended up with a bad ending, she would never forgive herself. At that time, she had lost all hope and used her precious divine power to protect Tyrant. Fortunately, this man called Du Kong had appeared out of nowhere. She knew a lot about Tyrant and the Stormrage brothers. But there was no other way. This was the best outcome. It was just that Tyrant would probably have to suffer. Duque and Tyrant also realized that they had gone too far. After fooling around for a while, they regained their composure. Elun continued, 4 of the items you obtained from Sargeras cannot be converted. They will bring you the deepest depravity. Then please destroy them for me, goddess. But Duque's heart was itching. It wasn't easy to get equipment from Sargeras, but most of them couldn't be used. Alright, I remember that there were 5 boxes in total. Elun's blurry avatar smiled. Thank goodness. And this one is the most compatible with my attributes. I can handle it for you. Duque looked at it, and his heart almost flew out of his chest. Moonlight Chalice. Chapter 1076. The Moonlight Holy Grail wasn't very famous among the players, but that wasn't the point. The point is, all you need to know is that it came from Sargeras. In the future, it would be brought into Sargeras' tomb, and could only be obtained from the Moon Sisters. In essence, this was an accessory for healers. However, after being personally adjusted by the moon goddess, Elun, its attributes had changed greatly. The basic attribute of the entire accessory was intelligence, but it was a ridiculously high intelligence bonus. How high was it? For a radiant moon wizard, it was about 1,000 stories tall. Even Duke, a Breaking Dawn archmage, was forcibly raised to the level of a rank 3 Breaking Dawn after enjoying the additional magic circuits. He wasn't even at the peak. Duke absolutely believed that this item, which should have only appeared after the 7th version of the game, would definitely last him until he reached the demigod stage. Apart from the intelligence bonus, the special effect of the Moonlight Holy Grail was also very amazing. When activated, it would grant haste in the day and critical strike at night. What an interesting piece of equipment. Duke, who had originally come to the ancient war with the intention of working to repay his debt of gratitude, was truly overjoyed. Ha ha ha. Thank you, Goddess Elun. Thank you. Duque bowed 3 times in a row in a rare moment of obedience. Compared to Shaman's huge gift bag, Jaden's gift was only average and within expectations. Even so, Duque finally managed to gather a full set of equipment that should have been at the Sunwell Highlands level in the future. Paired with the Wings of Death and Shaman's Moonlight Holy Grail, he was armed to the teeth. Of course, Duque wouldn't neglect Tyrant, and gave her a set of priest equipment. Those who stepped into the realm of heroes were all very powerful. For example, Tyrant was a huntress and a priest, at the same time. In theory, she could wear chainmail like a hunter, but considering that her most lethal skill was the divine arts, her attire was more inclined towards cloth armor. In the War of the Ancients, many demon lords had been killed. Unfortunately, Ronan and the others were all fattened up on Mount Hyjal, and basically didn't care about them. In the end, only Krasus changed his equipment. The problem was that this guy was a dragon. Dragons were the race that hated equipment the most. Their own scales, claws, and dragon breath were their strongest equipment. 3 days after the end of the Primordial War, it was finally time to part. Whether it was Ronan, Krasus, Grom, Vanessa, or Duke himself, they all felt like they were in a trance. Not to be tolerated by the world. Does not exist in this world. The world was rejecting Duque and the others, rejecting them. The indescribable feeling of the heavens and earth pressing down on them made it hard for them to breathe. On the balcony of the Elun shrine, Elun's incarnation led Isra and a group of demigods, while Tyrant led Malfurion and a group of mortals. They stared at Duque and the other 4. They had only known each other for a short period of time, but everyone knew that without these mysterious and powerful helpers from afar, this earth-shattering battle would have ended with the Burning Legion's complete victory. This was especially so for this mysterious Dukong. As the core of the group of 6, he did not hesitate to disgrace himself by joining the Burning Legion, reversing the portal, destroying the Void Fortress in the Twisting Nether, and completely annihilating billions of demons. In one fell swoop, he established at least 10,000 years of peace in Azeroth. Until now, no one asked where the group of 6 came from. Everyone had a common goal, the Burning Legion. It was enough to understand this. Misty rays of light began to appear on the bodies of the remaining 5 people. It was as if a mysterious existence was using an eraser that could erase everything in the world to gently erase their majestic figures. Starting from their hands and feet, signs of disintegration began to appear. Alexstrasza and Isra simultaneously looked at Nozdormu, who was silent, as if they had seen through everything. Tyrant stood at the front of the group, her hands clasped tightly between the 2 Mount Hyjal peaks. This was the only way she could feel her intense heartbeat through her fingers. For the past 2 days, she had made use of every minute and second to be with Duque. She completely ignored everything else around her, including the Stormwind brothers' gazes. Before the final moment arrived, she had said all that needed to be said, and done all that needed to be done. She did not want to say goodbye. Even though she knew that the outcome could not be changed, she still could not control her emotions. At this moment, Elun's incarnation gave Tyrande a light push. "Go! My child!" Without hesitation, Tyrande pounced forward, but when she opened her arms and crossed them, all she could see was an illusion. The last thing she saw was a face that only she could see, a face with a bitter smile. Oh! This was Du Kang's true appearance. He was not as bad as she had imagined, nor was he very handsome, but he was very much like you. Tyrande knelt on the ground, her entire body filled with melancholy and reluctance. Unbeknownst to her, everyone had already left. No matter how conflicted the Stormwind brothers were, they could only look at Tyrande's back, which seemed to be trembling from crying, and left with a long sigh. Only she and Elun's incarnation were left on the balcony. "Child! Have you thought it through? This is 10,000 years of loneliness. As long as you are willing to turn back." Tyrande suddenly stood up. Her blue hair danced in the wind, and she gently combed it with her fingers. Feeling the aura of fate flowing in the wind, her long and elegant silver eyes seemed to see through time and space, seeing 10,000 years in the future. Tyrande suddenly smiled. "Perhaps, my first encounter with him was definitely a prank by the goddess of fate. But don't you think that my 10,000 years of loneliness in exchange for 10,000 years of peace in Azeroth is too worth it?" "Child," Tyrande suddenly turned back, her beautiful face filled with determination. "At first, I was helpless. But later, that was my choice. Since I chose a great hero who could fight against the Burning Legion." "Humph. A mere 10,000 years is nothing. Was it anger? Self-mockery? Perseverance? Or stubbornness?" Not to mention Elun, even Tyrande herself did not know if she could really persevere with this slightly twisted emotion for 10,000 years. On the other side, Duque returned, also with melancholy. Perhaps, after the War of the Ancients, history would develop like the original version. For example, Illidan would once again build the Well of Eternity, and then the World Tree Nordrassil would be planted, followed by the Naga's reproduction and revenge. But Duque was thinking about something else. The figures of the five turned into streams of light, traveling at high speed in the long river of history. At this moment, a ray of bronze light suddenly crashed into Duque. This scene was so inconceivable. It was as if a sharpshooter had shot a flying arrow from the opposite side in a manner that allowed him to reach his target first. The bronze light knocked Duque out of the fixed spacetime orbit. Chapter 1077. Duque. Master? Beast Duke? The remaining four members of the history revisionists all cried out in shock. However, their cries were of no use. They were still wrapped in Nozdormu's power as they sped toward the end of the River of Time. "What's going on? I don't know. Isn't Nozdormu's power protecting us? Damn it! The bronze dragon isn't reliable at all." There was a lot of discussion, but no one could do anything. This wasn't their domain. Other than pointlessly waving their arms, they couldn't even draw their weapons, let alone launch an effective attack. Nozdormu's mysterious power isolated them from the outside world. Apart from seeing, speaking, and listening, they couldn't do anything. The power that collided with Duque seemed to be bronze too, right? Krasis asked. Ronan frowned. Did Nozdormu suddenly give Master a new mission? Vanessa was furious. That's not how you order people around. Grom hammered his thigh. Bastard. Then Lord Roar fell silent. No one knew who he was cursing or what he was cursing at. At this moment, in the void of the time crevice far behind the four of them, Duke was staring at a huge bronze dragon in the air. "Hello. Duke Marcus. I am Andam, a subordinate of His Majesty Nozdormu. The bronze dragon lowered his head slightly to show his respect. Oh. Duke didn't even lift his eyelids, as if he was in a half-awake state as he sized up this huge bronze dragon. I'm sorry to interrupt your return. There's an emergency. Time and space are in disorder again. His Majesty's command, you, Duke Marcus, are to head to the point of disorder immediately. Help the founding Emperor Sorodin and the High Elves defeat the Trolls during the Troll War 2,800 years ago in your original timeline. Help him build the Arathor Empire. With that, a green light flashed in Andam's hand. A magic scroll appeared in his claws, and he handed it to Duque. It was clearly an order. Duque frowned. Let me have a look. Yes, the situation is urgent, so there's no time to explain. Please take a look at the order book for the specifics. I'll open the time passage to the Troll War right away. Then, after seeing Duque take the scroll, Andam began to cast a spell. His dragon claws, which only had 3 fingers, cooperated with the spell and made all kinds of complicated gestures. Soon, a hazy and illusory portal was about to form. At this moment, without any sign or reason, a thin golden sword pierced through the gap between the scales on Andam's back. It extended to the length of a spear and came out of Andam's chest. Andam let out a shrill roar and swung his tail at the ambusher who had injured him. The dragon's tail, which was strong enough to shatter mountains, missed. He covered his chest with his left claw and twisted his neck. Only then did he see the ambusher, Duque. With Ice Queen in his left hand and Gandalf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword saint, in his right, Duque had a mocking smile on his face and stared at Andam maliciously. Duke Marcus. How dare you hurt me? Do you know what you're doing? You're challenging His Majesty Nozdormu. Are you declaring war on the entire bronze dragon race? Andam roared. Duque was unmoved. Instead, he sneered. Pretend. Keep pretending. You're just a stupid eternal dragon, and you want to fool me? Andam's face suddenly darkened. No, his whole body began to turn black. The wounds on his body were healing at a high speed, and his body began to expand rapidly. In less than a second, his entire body doubled in size. As a mortal, Duke Marcus, you're amazing. You actually found out. Ho ho ho. May I ask, how did you find out? In terms of appearance, Andam was still a bronze dragon, but his color had completely turned into a deep and terrifying ink black. Duque tilted his head. From the moment I was thrown into the twisting nether for no reason, I realized that someone wanted to kill me. And this guy is a super strong person with the power to interfere with the timeline. At first, I thought it was an ancient god, but then I locked my target on the eternal dragon body. Humph. Mortals don't know about us. Even Nozdormu doesn't know much about us. But I do. Duque interrupted Andam with unspeakable pride on his face. Yes, this was also the pride of a transmigrator. Ugh. As if choked to death, Andam laughed crazily. Stupid guy, do you think you can fight back? You have no chance. Idiot, look at what you have in your hand. Duque waved the magic scroll in his hand. You mean this thing? Sorry, the whispers inside are useless to me. This time, Andam's expression finally changed. Impossible. Duque's face was full of the smile of a victor. The whispers of the ancient gods are indeed powerful. But that's only for you silly dragons and other mortals. As for me. Hee hee. Hee hee. Really hee hee. Although Andam couldn't grasp the essence of the word hee hee, Duque's expression almost drove him crazy. That's right. That's the expression. Whether it's you eternal dragons or Sargeras, I like to see you sad and indignant, and want to kill me, but can't do anything about it. Duque was smug. He also had the capital to be smug. There was nothing more satisfying than throwing the opponent into a trap that he had set himself after he had broken the game. The whispers of the ancient gods? Yes. It was indeed powerful. Unfortunately, the whispers had a prerequisite, and that was to directly affect the deep subconscious of the victim. But ever since Duque had infiltrated the Burning Legion, he had been dividing his spiritual sea into layers and using the system to simulate a seemingly independent spiritual world in the shallowest layer. And from beginning to end, Duque couldn't speak the language of this world. Almost everything needed to be translated by the system. After Duque's special instructions, the whispers of the ancient gods became like this: "Have you finished your homework? Your mom is actually an orc. Your dad something Marcus found a Tauran as a mistress. Your brother Sal heard that I came back safely and decided to go to the temple to do a striptease. Heavens. I, Dumoke, am really good. Damn. Scared. Ah." Chapter 1078. By the way, what the hell was an eternal dragon? Why would the eternal dragons have the whispers of the ancient gods? This was a very long history. At first, when the Titan left Azeroth, he gave the 5 dragon aspects their own unique abilities, and at the same time, made them shoulder their respective responsibilities. For the bronze dragon, this responsibility was much more complicated than for the other dragons. They had to guard time and stick to the path of destiny. In the process of being the guardian of time, Nozdormu faced many dilemmas, and he eventually became the leader of the Eternal Dragons, forming a dragon legion that disturbed the timeline in various ways. So, what did this distant story have to do with Delano? 4 words, closely related. Delano's fate had long been tied to Azeroth. Although it was another planet, from the first day of the birth of this universe, these 2 worlds were inseparable, and they would depend on each other in the future. More importantly, Azeroth was not the first planet that the Titan had modified. The Titan traveled through countless worlds, each world being made into a unique piece of beautiful jade in its original form. However, all worlds had a common connection: time. When the leader of the Pantheon, Sardra's elder brother, the spouse of Ionar the Life-Giver, Amon-Sel, the Creation Titan, gave Nozdormu the power of time, he also gave the Bronze Dragon a maxim: "The great mission given to you is to maintain the purity of time. Know that there is only one true timeline, and you must protect it. If time does not flow in the established way, the consequences will be beyond your imagination. The structure of reality will fall apart. This is a heavy task, the foundation of all tasks in this world, because without time, there is no life." There was only one true timeline, not only for Azeroth, but also for the entire grand universe. So did parallel times exist? Of course. Moreover, the parallel time was constantly threatening to jump to the real timeline. If there was enough time power, a character could jump from a broken timeline to another time, and various effects would occur. For example, Sar was likely to be sold as a slave and then died in the arena. Another example was for Neltharion to pretend to be Lord Presto and successfully kill Tyreenas to become the leader of the Alliance. All of these characters exist, and all of them are living beings, some malevolent and terrifying, others noble and righteous, depending on the direction of their timeline. But the timeline they were in was not the real timeline, and their lives were not set. The Bronze Dragon, on the other hand, shuttled through the various timelines and cleaned up the time fragments created by the Eternal Dragon, so that these events would not affect the real world that Duque was currently in. This was the responsibility of Nozdormu and the Bronze Dragon. At first, when Nozdormu obtained the power to transcend time, he also knew how he would understand his life. Was this an unnecessary move? Of course not. This was to tell Nozdormu that even after obtaining the power of time, he would still reach the end, death. When there is life, there is death. When there is a beginning, there is an end. Everything is like this. As such, Nosdorm understood the need to protect the true timeline, as he could see what was happening in other timelines. However, in a certain timeline, Nosdormu was influenced by the whispers of the ancient gods, became Nosdr, and established the Eternal Dragon Army. The purpose of the Eternal Dragons was to change the fate of the world and destroy the real timeline, the timeline that Duque was in. Although Duke himself wasn't sure if the timeline he had transmigrated to was the real main timeline, but since ancient times, humans were mostly self-centered creatures. Didn't you see how Copernicus was burned at the stake for violating the geocentric theory? Since Duque had crossed into this timeline, maintaining this timeline as the main result had become one of Duque's duties. Although I, Duque, am also a guy who does not stop causing trouble is my privilege, okay? You eternal dragons who have been brainwashed by the ancient gods dare to say that you want to destroy the world that I have fought for and destroy my harem? Pfft! Who am I going to attack if not you? The eternal dragon who claimed to be Andam was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Perhaps he was Andam, but he could only be the brainwashed version of Andam in that collapsed timeline. He wanted to kill Duque. How could Duque not want to kill him? In the time gap above the river of time, an eternal dragon and a traveler started a life-and-death duel. In Duque's sight, Andam forcibly healed the wound on his chest that had just been pierced by Duque. Ha ha ha. Stupid mortal. Nosdormu's lackey, you don't understand the greatness of time and the power of time at all. All your damage is ineffective against me. Ha ha ha, Andam laughed wildly. Then, he was slapped in the face by Duque. Ha! I don't know why a certain eternal dragon used up 30% of the power in his body to turn time back to a time when he was not injured. Andam's laughter stopped abruptly, and there was clear fear on his extremely anthropomorphic face. Andam the eternal dragon, you can deceive idiots without common sense, but you can't deceive my eyes. Duque pointed at his eyes, but he was actually pointing at the system parameter display on his retina. There, Andam's HP bar was full again, but his blue bar had dropped by a full 30%. More importantly, the system determined that Andam's hostile level was not the undefeatable skeleton level, but the rare elite silver dragon level. The fattest thing in this world was, of course, the boss, but in the normal solo state, rare elites were also a good way to make a fortune. Humph. You know nothing about the battle in the realm of time. Andam roared, and it seemed to spit out a black flame behind him for no reason. Unexpectedly, Duque neither advanced nor retreated, and directly took 3 steps to the left. Something strange happened. The next moment, the black flame actually passed through Duque's left side. It looked like Duque had almost hit the dragon's breath, but he was actually unharmed. Impossible. How can a mortal see through it? Andam was so surprised that he almost bit his tongue off. Ha! Isn't it just the calculation of time and space? Duque looked at Andam as if he was a mentally handicapped child, which almost made Andam go crazy. The calculation of time and space was easy to say, and even many combat theories since ancient times were actually based on this theory. But in the long river of time, who could calculate as accurately as Duque, who had the system elf? Chapter 1079. In a primitive duel, the easiest way for one party to see the other with a weapon was to stab the weapon directly at the shortest distance. It took time to stab, and during this time, if the other party blocked, dodged, or otherwise nullified the attacker's attack, it would be a successful defense. This was the difficulty of fighting in the river of time. On the surface, there was no problem with a human and a dragon communicating verbally, but this was just an illusion caused by the time rift. They were actually separated from each other for a long time. This was not a matter of minutes or seconds. Often, if one dodged well, it could be a day, a month, or even a long time in units of time. Let's say, if the guy you're facing took a year to stab you, it would be a genius for him to be able to stab you in the same spot as you were. Under normal circumstances, if you were to be stabbed, you'd be a genius. This was the problem in the time rift. Both Duque and Andam were protected by the laws of time. Although Duque had the power of Nosdorm, the laws of time between them had to be judged according to the laws in the river of time. To hurt each other, one had to calculate the true time and distance between each other. It stood to reason that a mortal like Duque could not have this ability, which was why Andam refused to believe it. However, in the next moment, Duque slapped the eternal dragon in the face with practical action. Slap! A huge palm of arcane energy slapped Andam's dragon face. This was not just a simple slap in the face. With the power of time in the river of time, the slap actually collapsed half of Andam's face. On Andam's long dragon mouth, the upper and lower lip muscles that covered the right dragon tooth were all slapped away. Strangely and terrifyingly, there was no blood splattering everywhere, and all the wounds turned into scabs in an instant. It could be clearly seen that many of the dragon teeth in Andam's right jaw had cracks, and then they gave off an ancient feeling. Finally, the teeth fell out. The eternal dragon's strong teeth were not destroyed by the impact, but old. Fall. Teeth. Duque's magic attack actually attracted the power of time, directly accelerating the decline and aging of the injured part. This time, Andam was afraid. He was truly afraid. He flapped his wings with all his might, striving to widen the time distance between him and Duque. At the same time, he shouted, Your true form is a bronze dragon." "Bronze dragon? Chi!" Duque sneered. At the same time, his feet did not stop. "I'm not such a high-end existence. I'm Duque, a mortal, although ordinary but a little special." While smiling, Duque walked towards Andam at a seemingly slow pace. Only the eternal dragon, who also used time as a weapon, knew the horror of Duque. Every step he took seemed to be strolling leisurely, but he actually avoided every unstable node in the dimensional rift, and then stepped on a small tributary that could accelerate the flow of time. The principle behind this method of playing was no different from surfing, but the danger involved and the grasp of time were simply exquisite. Such a method was far superior to that of an eternal dragon born as a bronze dragon. "No, it can't be," Andam shouted. He. "Am I going to be killed by you like a target? Is that what you think makes sense?" Duque snorted. While the two enemies spat at each other, their hands were unwavering. Andam blasted dozens of dragon breaths, as well as over 100 kinds of offensive spells that Duque knew or couldn't figure out at all, at Duque's head. In Andam's imagination, with Duque's weak vitality, just one hit would make him kneel. Fragile? Perhaps it was. Compared to the big, powerful lizards like the dragons, the human body was too fragile. In other words, because of the dragon's strong vitality, they could have many opportunities to make mistakes. Humans, however, could not. Many people would be frightened and cowardly in such a situation where they would die in one hit, and they would greatly lose their level. In the past, Duque was likely to be like this, but 15 years of experience had long turned Duque from a rookie who could not fight at all into a beast feared on the battlefield. Andam's attacks seemed to be a storm, but Duque still looked like he was oblivious to everything and was playing with elegant micro-steps. Under his feet, there was a colorful light that condensed all the past historical fragments of the world. If he was not careful, he could fall into a certain period of history and never come out again. Either he would be integrated into that period of history, or he would be swallowed by that period of time and space, not even his bones would be left. In front of him was the violent and brutal destructive power that gathered all the killing intent of the eternal dragon. If he was hit by one, it would be enough to turn Duque into ashes and disappear from history forever. Even Nosdormu could not find a trace of this terrible attack. But Duque had a 100% dodge. No. Impossible. Andam screamed, but he could not stop Duque, who was holding a golden sword, from approaching him. Duque also fought back, and countless hands of magic appeared above the river of time, shooting into the void without any rhyme or reason. It seemed like a waste of magic power to shoot randomly, but when Andam tried to dodge Duque's frontal attack, he was shocked to find that those shots actually blocked his escape route. This should be impossible in the domain of the river of time, where the flow of time was not fixed and could even be said to be quite chaotic. This was like someone firing a shot 100 years ago, and the bullet flew unscientifically for 100 years before accurately hitting the enemy. It was simply absurd. Andam wanted to ignore this fact, but the constant pain coming from all over his body told him that all of Duque's attacks were real and not an illusion. He could indeed use special magic to heal his injuries, but unfortunately, both sides knew that this recovery ability was not endless. This form of recovery by reversing time consumed more magic power than the holy light recovery developed by humans and night elves. No, no, no! Andam screamed incessantly, constantly changing his attack methods in an attempt to hit Duque. Unfortunately, no matter what, it was as ridiculous as a mortal trying to chop a ghost to death with a kitchen knife. Unknowingly, Duque had arrived in front of Andam and stood still, his face full of sarcasm that made Andam look like he deserved a beating. It's over. Eat my meteor chi explosion. In the river of time, the golden sword light formed one gorgeous arc of light after another, incessantly cutting the eternal dragon's huge body. From the initial 100% recovery, to black blood splattering everywhere, and then to screams, 3 seconds later, when the 1024 sword slashes were finished, the river of time returned to deathly silence. Chapter 1080. Villains died because they talked too much, and righteous people died because they talked too much. Speaking of which, everything that Duque said before could be included in the scope of mental attacks. It wasn't until the system prompt said that the eternal dragon Andam from another timeline died that Duque breathed a sigh of relief. Damn, the Moonlight Holy Grail is too awesome. Duque suddenly discovered that because Gandalf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword saint, was a rare and strange magic sword, it enjoyed the complete magic bonus, and the Moonlight Holy Grail was effective. And in this place where it was impossible to distinguish between day and night, the amazing Moonlight Holy Grail could trigger 2 special effects at the same time, spell haste and critical hit. What was even more incredible was that in this space where time could be compressed and extended infinitely, attack speed and critical hit damage could be stacked almost infinitely. This was the birth of the completely unreasonable 1024 sword strikes in 3 seconds. The eternal dragon was actually chopped by Duque's melee attack. Duque quickly searched Andam's body and quickly calmed down. He sensed Nosdorm's power and let himself fly back to the space-time route that Nosdorm had set for him on the River of Time. In the end, Duque didn't have the ability to travel through time on his own. He could survive on the River of Time entirely because of Nosdorm's power. Here came the problem. As insurance, Nosdorm must have injected a lot of power into Duque in the process of sending him back to the modern world, but no matter how much it was, it wouldn't be double. According to the system's estimation, it was about 130%. However, in the space-time rift just now, even though Duque had played a beautiful wave-like subtle steps above the River of Time and dodged 100%, he still consumed a lot of time power because he entered the space-time rift. Only 98% of the original energy is left? Duque narrowed his eyes. Yes. According to the calculation, assuming that he successfully returned to the original time point of the Dark Portal in 16 years, the energy needed was 100, and now Duque needed 98. Don't underestimate the 2% difference. The slightest difference could lead to a great difference. If Duque were to kneel, he would definitely kneel at these 2 percentage points. Looks like I can only count on this. Duque looked at the ball of unknown energy wrapped in arcane energy in his hand. System Elf, begin analysis. That was what he had obtained from killing Andam. It wasn't a gold coin or a piece of legendary equipment, but a mass of power. Duque felt a slight pain in his brain. It was the side effect of the System Elf extracting Duque's memories at high speed. As an engineering university student, his knowledge of physics and astronomy was passable. When the System Elf combined a large amount of modern knowledge with the power of time snatched from the Eternal Dragon, and put it together with the arcane Archmage's deceleration tactic for analysis, a mysterious magic tactic barged into Duque's mind: time acceleration. Speed up? I can only use this bit of power once. Duque smiled bitterly. According to the original remaining power of time, Duque would obviously fall into the time period 16 years before the Dark Portal. Either he would go to a time point before his main body had transmigrated, or even worse, he would go to the world of Azeroth between the 1st and 16th years of the Dark Portal, where there was already a Duque. If the use of acceleration was too exaggerated and he went to a later time point, my Duque's kingdom would be finished. Damn it! I hate the Eternal Dragon the most. The second is Nozdormu. He can't even protect me through time, and he has the nerve to ask me to work for him. Bah! In the future, whoever wants to go can go, but don't ask me and my people to go. Although he was cursing, Duque had to restrain his mind and concentrate on the River of Time. Through the time fragments that the system kept scanning, he confirmed where his end point was. When Duque saw the fragment of Thoradin the Great, Duque realized that it was a little close. Then, Duque saw the fragment of Aegwynn dominating the world. Then, Aegwynn beat up Sargeras, who was pretending to be a grandson. When Duque's retina showed that there was only 2% of the power of time left, Duque's spirit was lifted. Now is the time. Duque began to accelerate. Suddenly, he injected that small ball of power of Andam into the spacetime shield around him, and Duque's whole body burst out with a stronger stream of light. Like a comet falling into the atmosphere, Duque's whole body glowed, dragging a long tail of flames, and swept across the sky above the River of Time. He saw the fragment of the opening of the Dark Portal, saw himself killing the Mediv possessed by Sargeras, saw the Alliance commander Duque sweeping through the Horde, and saw him returning from the void to once again organize the Alliance to fight against the Scourge army. Finally, he saw his destination, 16 years of the Dark Portal. In front of him, it seemed that because Ronan and the others had just entered this part of the time node, Duque could still see the 4 small holes that had just been opened and not yet closed with the help of the system. Go in for me. Duque was too fast. Breaking into that point of time was like driving at a speed of 200 km per hour, stretching his hand out of the car window and using 2 fingers to pinch a strand of hair that was blown by the wind by the window. Other than Duke, who had the System Elf, there was no one else who could do better than him in this kind of insanely precise operation. Even if Nozdorm's main body came over, he would at most be able to do this by pulling each other's strength, instead of crashing into it with insufficient strength like Duque. Duque did it. He had indeed met his goal. He succeeded. And failed. Because he had indeed hit the time bubble that represented the time he was at, but in the next instant, he was sent flying. On the 16 years of time bubble of the Dark Portal, a black power that clearly came from the Eternal Dragon was rejecting Duque's entry. King Hell, with the momentum, Duque's entire body continued to fly forward in the River of Time. The only fortunate thing was that Duque's collision seemed to have finally attracted the attention of that bastard dragon, Nozdorm. Right on top of the huge time bubble, a huge bronze dragon claw reached out and attempted to grab Duque, who was flying forward at high speed. Nozdorm failed. He grabbed nothing. Although it was just a little bit off, it was still nothing. Nozdorm. You useless dragon king. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Duque was furious. Duque cried. Duque was in despair. However, at the very end, a sentence suddenly appeared from the system: analysis of spacetime anchor, tactic completed, found the nearest anchor point in front. Do you want to enter? Yes. Duque said decisively. Chapter 1081. The 16th year of the Dark Portal was destined to be a turbulent one. Before winter was over, the Alliance launched a large-scale attack on the Lordaeron continent and reclaimed Lordaeron, which had fallen and changed hands twice. On the 12th of August, the Alliance received a piece of bad news. Of the 6 powerhouses who participated in Nozdormu's secret operation, only 4 returned. The old beastman, Brock, died in battle. The tribe did not announce the exact cause of his death. They only announced that he died in the hands of the Burning Legion in a secret operation that could not be announced to the public. Thrall and Grom led the elders of the tribe to attend Brock's state funeral. The other was Duque, the former leader of the Alliance. Even though he was cursed by Kill Jaden, he forcefully reversed the curse and banished the power of darkness. He was a great hero who went missing in a secret mission. Although it was not the first time Duque went missing, his disappearance this time caused an even bigger uproar. Because the 4 survivors said that a bronze dragon stopped Duque, the reaction of several major countries in the Alliance was extremely intense. Queen Sylvanas of the Sin Dorii Kingdom. Queen Gianna of Kul Tiras. Queen Kalia of Lordaeron. The heroines of the Alliance, Aurelia and Sasha, as well as Elusia, who had great influence in the South Sea city-state, all sent the sternest questions to the bronze dragons. Nozdormu could ignore these mortal forces, but the problem was that his big sister, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, had personally come to his doorstep and almost destroyed his nest. Also, the moon goddess Elun had descended a few times. Nozdormu was getting a headache. Time passed day by day. Aurelia and the other women waited day by day, but they were disappointed every day. We should be at ease. Duque might have gone to that person to fool around. Aurelia smiled bitterly. Vanessa had already reported to her on the first day she returned. However, that person had a strange reaction as well. He firmly denied Aurelia and the others' indirect inquiries. However, the Alliance and the Night Elves weren't really allies. The 5 women of the Duque family couldn't find a better reason to bother them. In any case, the Moon God Shrine just dealt with them indifferently. In fact, the leader of a country was very busy. In this day and age, there wasn't a king who was lucky enough to be a human stamping machine. Every family has its own troubles. Sin, Dorii and Kul Tiras were busy rebuilding, and Elusia also needed to use the power of the South Sea city-state and the Marcus family's merchant fleet to help these 2 families. In the end, the only ones who were free were the Windrunner's eldest sister and 3rd sister. Tyrande would visit Aurelia or Sasha whenever she had the time. She didn't have the time to leave them hanging. The days of the Night Elves were really not good. On one hand, they had to provide disaster relief from the explosion of Mount Hyjal, and on the other hand, they had to face all kinds of threats. Sentries must be sent to the eastern Azhara to keep an eye on the new Naga and satyrs. Although the South had once joined forces with the Horde to fight against the Burning Legion, the Horde's continuous requests for logging made the Night Elves very unhappy. In fact, in the Stonetalan Mountains, the 2 races also had border conflicts. On the western shore of the Black Sea, a large number of Night Elves who had lost their homes were waiting for ships to cross the sea. This was because in Teldrassil, Fandral Staghelm advocated to plant a 2nd world tree there. At the same time, he tried his best to negotiate with the Dragon Slumber Shrine, attempting to get the 3 Dragon Kings to continue to give blessings like the World Tree, Nordrassil. In other words, the Night Elves would lose their eternal life and youth. Many elves felt a sense of crisis. In the northern Winterspring Valley, they were invaded by the undead who claimed to be the Forsaken. In the central Fellwood Forest and Grey Valley, the remaining demons of the Burning Legion were still doing evil. Tyrant's claim that they were busy was definitely reasonable. After being repeatedly rejected, Aurelia and her sister rarely came to Teldrassil. Time passed like this, and in the blink of an eye, it was the beginning of the 17th year of the Dark Portal. The construction of the Horde's main city, Orgrimmar, was announced. At the same time, the Horde's territory had expanded a lot. In the north, they basically reached the edge of the Night Elves' territory, and in the south, Theramore was also bordering Theramore. In view of this, after some discussion, the Alliance decided to agree to the peace treaty proposed by Thrall during the King's Conference when the Night Elves were still unwilling to accept the Alliance's olive branch. In June of the same year, as the new Alliance leader, Varian Wrynn, personally crossed the Endless Sea and came to Theramore to meet with Thrall to sign the peace treaty between the Alliance and the Horde. In the end, Varian unexpectedly disappeared, and when he came back, he was completely muddle-headed. The Alliance suspected that it was a conspiracy by the Horde, and there were even conspiracy theorists who directly accused the Horde's wizards and warlocks of doing this. Thrall could not defend himself, and the relationship between the Alliance and the Horde suddenly froze. Time continued to pass. Who knew how many days, months, or years had passed? Suddenly, a huge ripple appeared in the thick clouds in the night sky. A comet fell from the sky, streaking across the sky with a long tail of flames, and crashed into the surface of a huge lake. Boom! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The huge waves caused chaos on the beautiful shore of the lake. After a short but intense wave that was like a tsunami crashing into the shore, it was a mess everywhere. A human body that looked like a salted fish was washed to the shore. Am I dead? In a daze, the human body only saw a pair of white boots with golden embroidery standing in his blurry vision, and then he lost consciousness. After an unknown amount of time, Duque woke up. The moment he regained consciousness, Duque felt that something was wrong. Because he found himself tied to an execution rack, and his eyes were blindfolded. Not good, not good. This is definitely not good. Duque suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. If it was not a hostile force, he would never be tied up like this. Who knew how many seals were placed on his body to forcibly suppress the circulation of the magic circuit in his body? It would be better if the system elf was operating normally, but after passing through the time barrier, the system elf seemed to be temporarily down. Who was it? Which faction was it? Logically speaking, in Azeroth, it was probably the Forsaken who hated him so much, right? What the hell, am I really that unlucky? Did I suddenly fall into the hands of those skeletons? Or did history change drastically again, and I came to a time when the situation is collapsing? Suddenly, a deliberately suppressed voice sounded in Duque's ear. It was a hoarse voice, and other than judging that it should be a female voice, Duque could not tell anything else. Duke Marcus. Do you know what sin you have committed? Accompanied by a sharp rebuke was the sound of a long whip hitting the ground. Chapter 1082. Whip? Wax dripping? Yamit? It sounded so scary. Duque's face fell. This. If you're a demon from the Burning Legion, then my crime of slaughtering 5 billion of your people is unforgivable. But, can I trouble you not to use an old torture tool that hasn't been used in centuries to pretend to be a demon from the evil faction in such a beautiful place? Really, you don't look like one at all. Suddenly, there was another whip. This time, it accurately brushed past the side of Duke's cheek, and the strong wind it brought caused Duke's face to feel a stinging pain. I didn't ask you about the Burning Legion. The woman was furious. Not official business? Then. Tyrant, is that you? If there was anyone that Duque owed, it would definitely be Tyrant. After all, whether it was intentional or not, he had committed crimes in the ancient war and left her behind for 10,000 years. Ha! You still know? As if adding fuel to the fire, the woman's voice suddenly rose by an octave. In her rage, she finally revealed her original voice. Everyone had their own unique way of speaking. Tyrant's voice, which was filled with holiness and did not seem angry even when she was angry, was something that only the priestesses of the Moon Shrine possessed. Duque no longer hesitated and used his ultimate move. He did something that she definitely did not expect. He used his muscular strength and broke the two rusty and brittle shackles on his wrists in a very manly manner. The next moment, he followed the voice and hugged the beauty in front of him. "I'm sorry, Tyrant." Before Duque could finish speaking, he instinctively felt that the woman in his arms was not Tyrant. The height of her breasts was completely different. One had to know that before he transmigrated, Duque had visually measured Tyrant's size. Over the past 10,000 years, she had not weakened at all. Alright, here comes the terrible question, who is she? At that moment, Duque clearly felt the malice of the goddess of destiny. As the black cloth in front of his eyes slid off, Duque could clearly see that he was hugging a green-haired priestess. Less than 5 meters in front of him, the main character of the scene, Tyrant, pushed open the door angrily and saw everything perfectly. Such a melodramatic scene, who dares to tell me that no one deliberately arranged it? I, Duque, will be the first to not believe it. But, as expected, Tyrant flew into a rage. Die. Duque, Tyrant raised her hands and used her ultimate skill, Starfall. Duque's face froze. What had happened to Tyrant in the past 10,000 years? Why did it accumulate so much resentment? Duque had no way of knowing the answers to these questions. All he knew was that things were getting out of hand. The thick clouds in the sky were suddenly parted by a huge meteor, bringing with it the shrill cry of death as it crashed down. It was a meteor the size of a carriage. Only Tyrant, as the high priestess of the moon goddess, could accurately use Elun's power to make the meteor fall from outer space towards Duque. The blue beam of light locked onto Duque's forehead was the best guide. Under the power of the moon goddess, the meteor sped up and sped up. From breaking through the clouds to landing on Duque's forehead, it took less than 3 seconds. Perhaps Duque could have chosen to dodge or use his Breaking Dawn magic to defend himself. If not, he could have used Ice Barrier to take the hit. Duque did not. Because when he saw the anger written all over that beautiful face that seemed to have been separated for only half a day, Duque's heart suddenly ached. What happened to Tyrant was also recorded in the original history. In the original timeline, she was also captured by Savis, but because of the Gemini's strategy, even Archimonde could not touch Tyrant under Elun's power. Even so, many night elves were unhappy with Tyrant because of this, believing that she had already submitted. No. In fact, being captured was a humiliation in itself. Because of this, rumors began to spread. They said that Tyrant had been tainted by demons and had lost her purity, so she did not have the right to be the high priestess of Elun. They also said that Tyrant had already betrayed her people like Queen Azhara, but there was no evidence. There were even rumors that Tyrant had instructed Malfurion to protect Illidan, who should have been sentenced to death. In the original timeline, Tyrant was already so sad. Now that Duque was a living witness, Duque could totally imagine what kind of scolding Tyrant had endured in the past 10,000 years, such as being despicable, immersed in lust, abandoning the Stormrage brothers. Duque silently sensed the falling meteorite from the sky. When the death that fell from the sky smashed the roof and was about to fall on his head, Duque still made a heavy decision. It seemed like he had not died for a long time. Then I'll die this time, IOU. Arcane impact, with only the force of impact pushed the woman in his arms away. Duque looked up 45 degrees to the sky, with a faint smile on his face, and opened his arms. Accompanying that resigned expression was the tear that flowed from his left eye. When the meteorite was less than a meter away from Duque's head, Duque silently mouthed 3 words, yes. No. Rise. Then, Duque calmly closed his eyes and waited for death to come. Whoosh! Very abruptly, the sound of destruction came to an abrupt end. The once incomparably noisy world seemed to have been erased by the attack of the gods. Death did not come as expected. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. When Duque could not help but open his eyes again, he saw an incomparably shocking scene. The meteorite that seemed to be able to pierce through a mountain had actually stopped less than 10 centimeters away from his head. A bright white light enveloped the entire meteorite, preventing it from descending any further. The next moment, a head of long blue hair with streaks of silver covered Duque's entire vision. Before he could even react, Duque's lips had already been taken over by an incomparably domineering force. Under the immense force in front of him, Duque's entire body fell backwards, and he felt dizzy. That familiar deep kiss, that familiar feeling of her chest. That's right, it's definitely Tyrant. Duque was a little confused, but this did not stop him from enjoying the beauty's love. How long did they kiss? Almost to the point of suffocation. It was only then that Tyrant lifted her head reluctantly. Looking at the silver thread that connected their lips, Tyrant's face flushed red in an instant. Bastard! Why didn't you dodge? Tyrant scolded. Chapter 1083. At this moment, Duque was possessed by the best actor. At this moment, Stephen Chow and Duque were together. Even though it was not a complete lie, Duque still decided to use this nuclear bomb level line and changed it. Once, the goddess of fate placed a strange but sincere love in front of me, and I could not cherish it. In the 10,000 years that I spent in the river of time, I spent every day and night in regret. This is the most painful thing in the world. Since the heavens have given me a chance to reunite after 10,000 years, even if I die at the hands of that woman, I will say, I'm sorry, but I love you. Bastard, how can I hate you when you're like this? Tyrant's tear ducts burst. Because she was on top and he was on the bottom, her bead-like tears washed Duque's face. Duque smiled bitterly and touched the side of Tyrant's face. He comforted her gently, "It's okay, I'm back now, right?" Sob, sob, sob. "I'm so touched. I don't hate you anymore." Hearing the crying from next door, Duque felt a little awkward. "Who the hell are you? Why are you crying too?" Tyrant was so angry that she laughed and turned her head. "Chandris. This has nothing to do with you. I'll deal with you for imprisoning Duque later." Duque was dumbfounded. "I'm sorry, Duque. She's Chandris, my adopted daughter during the ancient war. Sigh. I can't even get rid of her. Sigh, I shouldn't have spoiled this little girl. Please. I'm over 10,000 years old." Chandris grimaced. Duque wanted to facepalm. Of course he knew who Chandris Feathermoon was. After the cataclysm, the Feathermoon stronghold was on land, and a troublesome hunter kited to Orgrimmar. He wanted to see a good show where the leader of the Horde defeated the leader of the Alliance, but he failed. Brainless Howl and Gammer lost to her in single combat. The most overpowered thing was that she had inherited Tyrant's Starfall, and Prayer of the Moonlight Goddess, which allowed her to attack the entire screen. He was definitely one of the fiercest leaders in the Alliance. However, this guy was still a one-sided love, and he had been single for 10,000 years. Yes, the one who had a crush on her was May of Shadowsong's younger brother, Jared Shadowsong, the de facto leader of the Allied army. Since Tyrant had pointed out Chandris's name, Duque had a general idea of what was going on. This was the gushing spring lake of Teldrassil, a giant island in the middle of the sea where only the night elves lived. For some reason, when he transmigrated back to this world, he was discovered by Chandris, who hated him for abandoning Tyrant. If not for Tyrant's arrival, it would have been a melodramatic scene. Now, it could be considered a pass. The house had been destroyed by tyrants, starfall, and such a huge commotion could not be hidden from the people nearby. After Tyrant sent Chandris to clean up the mess outside, Duque and Tyrant finally went to a room belonging to the Alun sisters to have a good chat. Duque was eager to know what had happened while he was away. Duke, who was the first to enter, was dumbfounded. He cursed on the spot, holy sh*t. Resentment. Soaring resentment. Thousands of bananas, like dried meat, were hung on the four walls with their eyes wide open. These dried bananas looked like specimens that had lost all their moisture, but still maintained their bright yellow color. They were arranged neatly from floor to ceiling on the 4-meter-tall wall. I suddenly remembered that I have something urgent to attend to. Duque turned around and left. Unfortunately, it was too late. Tyrant still had the holy smile of a high priestess on her face, but her actions were not holy at all. Sister, why are you taking off your equipment if not to run faster in the dungeon? Although he was shocked, Duke's pair of shifty eyes could not move away. Huh. You didn't even want to tell me your real name back then. In the end, 10,000 years later, when your lover found me and told me that you had gone to the ancient war, I found out that Duque was Duque. May I ask, dear Mr. Duque, what urgent matter is more important than catching up? Yes. The world of Azeroth is still waiting for me to save it. Duque said with his head held high. Oh. If it wasn't for the fact that you have protected the world of Azeroth for 10,000 years, do you think I would wait for you like an idiot for 10,000 years? Duque clenched his teeth and instinctively took a step back. As he did so, he fell to the ground. Tyrant. We are both people of status. Don't get physical. If you have something to say, let's talk. Fine. So what if I use my mouth to convince you? Tyrant put her hands behind her back, but she did not stop walking. She approached him step by step. At that moment, Duque finally understood what it meant to fall into one's own trap. Back then, when the 7 great sins broke out, he had given Tyrant 10 terabytes of information. Now, retribution had come. Duque looked at the lingering bananas and finally broke down. Don't scare me. I actually have a weak heart. Tyrant did not say anything. One look from her made Duque's blood flow become uneven. Scream then. Scream then. Here, no one will hear you even if you scream your lungs out. Tyrant used the words that Duque had given her all those years ago. She almost angered Duque to death. Duque was quite strong-willed. When he realized that he would be stabbed no matter what he did, his temper flared up. He put his hands on his waist and laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. Tyrant. Have you forgotten? You haven't beaten me even once. Do you still remember the terror of being controlled by Duque's godly sword? Sorry. A certain lover was too unqualified and didn't come for 10,000 years, so I've long forgotten. With that, Tyrant launched an attack. How terrifying was 10,000 years of resentment. One could tell from Duque's pitiful howl. No, don't stop. This battle would later be called the Battle of 10,000 Years, by the two of them. This battle was truly earth-shattering and earth-shattering. With the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza's blessing of life, countless warriors were quickly duplicated. Billions of soldiers bravely sacrificed their lives for the sake of righteousness. In Duque's mind, this battle was also called the Clone War. Cough cough. Duke came back to his senses, and the first thing he did was to set those banana lords on fire and expiate them. This thing was simply ominous. Of course, what made Duque's head hurt the most was the news that Tyrant told him. What? It's been 20 years since the Dark Portal? Tyrant said faintly, yes. We agreed to wait for 10,000 years, but you're 20 years late. Chapter 1084. Dooku was like a dead dog in the soul. Thanks to the Red Dragon Queen's buff, Dooku made it through. He pressed down on Tyrande just like that. Normal people wouldn't like such a feeling, but Tyrande seemed to enjoy treating Dooku like a human blanket. As for being 20 years late, Dooku actually wanted to say that he was only 0.02 of a time late. But considering that Tyrande's days felt like years, Dooku decided to shut his mouth. Transmigration is too messy. Tyrande sighed. Blame Nozdorm. When I have time, I'll definitely find him. Forget it. I'm already very happy that you're back. At least I can tell myself that the long and painful wait has finally come to an end. Phew, Dooku exhaled. Get up. We have more things to do than a mountain. Eek. Just as Tyrande stood up, her body suddenly stiffened. Her blue eyebrows furrowed. What? Does it hurt? I told you not to be so crazy. Dooku took the opportunity to lecture her. No, my body is fine. You just pressed against my hair. Dooku suddenly wanted to cry. Damn, a female driver can't be hurt while racing. Half an hour later, a radiant Tyrande returned to the priestess and elegance of the High Priestess. Dooku didn't know if he was a fraud or if Tyrande was a fraud. Alright, great uncrowned Lord of the Alliance, after you've visited your precious queens, I'll be waiting for you. Remember to stay one more night when you come to sign the contract. Dooku bared his teeth. Tyrande really dared to say that. Alright, Dooku knew that he couldn't promise her anything. After all, he could only give her one title. If he gave her one, what about the others? If he made a mistake, the Alliance would have a civil war before the Horde could rise. But, contract? Rin and Bronzebeard invited me to join the Alliance many times. I've been dragging it out. It's not that the Night Elves don't want to join, but it's because I didn't dare to leave the fate of my people in Varian Rin's hands. He was still too young and lacked experience. And after he disappeared and returned, he became muddle-headed. When Dooku heard this, his heart skipped a beat. Indeed, without him around, history would easily return to its original path. However, Dooku had no intention of saving William at the moment. Whether or not a person could become a useful person depended on their talent. Those with good talent would undoubtedly succeed more easily than those with poor talent. In this life, William's teenage years were relatively smooth. Because of Dooku's intervention, King Lang's death was delayed for a long time. This prevented William's childhood from being too terrible. This, in turn, has its disadvantages. Without the bitter days of being homeless and living under someone else's roof, William's temperament in this life was still too jumpy and not steady enough. Apart from talent, the key to a person's success was experience. Only by gaining true experience from cruel events and sharpening one's willpower and ability would one have the opportunity to become a true expert. Therefore, even though Dooku knew who the mastermind was, Dooku still chose to remain silent. For years had passed, and the biggest news was Anduin Lothar's death. He had passed away peacefully last spring at the age of 65 after receiving the news of William's return. For humans in this era, Lothar was considered to have lived a long life. Moreover, he had been seriously injured during the duel with Orgrim on the scorching plains, which left him with a lingering illness. It was already a miracle that he could survive for so long. Moreover, he had repeatedly rejected the eternal life that Dooku had stolen from Nozdormu. My life can be said to be magnificent. I've failed before, but I've always won in the end. As a warrior, I've already obtained the ultimate glory. I have no regrets to be able to see William and you grow up and become independent. Let me die as a knight. This was what Lothar had said to Dooku back then. Dooku knew that Lothar hoped that the earthy royal bloodline, which was meaningless in his eyes, would end here. This was because a noble and righteous bloodline would not be a good thing for the human countries, or even the entire alliance. Sigh. The noble has already passed away, but a fellow like me has obtained eternal life. Duque could not help but mock himself. Suddenly, Tyrant held Duque's face in her hands, and a pair of silver eyes that seemed to be able to speak shot a reproachful gaze at him. Duque. Don't belittle yourself. By belittling yourself, you're belittling me. What do you think drove me to learn those things that made me want to die from embarrassment? And why do you think I had to wait for you for 10,000 years? There's only one answer. A great hero like you is worthy of me giving up everything to love you. It's worth me going crazy for you, and even falling for you. Do you understand? Faced with Tyrant's burning gaze, Duque could not hold it in any longer and kissed her fiercely. Compared to Lothar's death, what surprised Duque more was that Wuxia had become the queen of the new Alterac kingdom last year. Alterac's territory included the current South Sea city-state, Gorehold Castle, Terran Mill, and the old broken ridge of the former Alterac kingdom, with Southshore as its capital. Although this had all happened when Duque was not around, Duque could still understand the context of the matter. His harem seemed to be using this method to maintain their influence within the alliance. Servanas, Jaina, Wuxia, and now Tyrant, as well as Kalia, who had always been loyal to Duque, meant that Duque had 5 votes in the kingdom. Moreover, Bolvar for Dragon was the regent of Stormwind, so it was not difficult to convince him. This meant that Duque still had the absolute say in the alliance. Originally, the alliance had a great advantage, but the problem was that in these 4 years, the horde had risen rapidly. The biggest difference was that in this life, the horde had accepted goblins into the horde in advance. He did not know if it was because of the history of the Battle of the Scorching Plains, or because he had personally witnessed the Battle of Mount Hyjal, but the performance of the alliance had deeply stimulated Thrall. As a result, after the goblins on both sides who wanted to earn money through underhanded means were jointly blocked by Jaina and Wuxia, Thrall directly threw out an olive branch to the angry goblins. In addition, Anastrian had brought the Forsaken to Winterspring. In terms of results, the horde had basically surrounded half of the Night Elves' territory. Duque narrowed his eyes, and first drew a circle on the map of the Kalimdor continent, at the place that would become Rustwater Port in the future. We must not let the horde surround us. What gave Duque the most headache was that in the report that Aurelia had sent to Tyrant, there was a piece of information. A large number of orcs, formerly of the Blackrock clan, had begun to occupy the Blackrock mountain area between the Burning Plains and the Scorching Canyon. They showed signs of colluding with the Black Dragons. Chapter 1085. After returning, Duque had a mountain of things to do. He should have immediately returned to Stormwind, but he owed Tyrant too much. He could only give in under Tyrant's aggrieved gaze and agree to stay for a few more days. After the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Malfurion had once again entered the Emerald Dream, and Fandral Staghelm had just successfully planted the New World Tree, Teldrassil. Although the Dragon Kings refused to bless the Night Elves with eternal life, the Night Elves who believed that the World Tree was everything were now worshipping Fandral. Tyrant did not bother with the popular Fandral, and instead gave him some of her worldly power. Duque asked around and felt that there were no problems. The leader of the Sentinels was now Chandri's Feathermoon, Tyrant's adopted daughter. In other words, Tyrant, who had military and divine power, was in no danger at all in terms of political power. But then again, daughter. I almost thought that Chandri's was our daughter. Duque seemed to say it casually, but he actually felt a little regretful. It had been 20 years since he transmigrated. Although his physical body was eternal, Duque felt that it was weird that no one had died. If it was just a woman, he might be able to push the blame. It's not that easy. Tyrant, who had just finished a great battle, smiled with satisfaction. Do you think I didn't want to have a child with you? With a child, I wouldn't have been so lonely in the past 10,000 years. But Goddess Elun told me not to think about it before I become a demigod. Ah! Duque cried out. What? Didn't the goddess repair your soul and expel the power of darkness for you after the War of the Ancients? Yes. That's right. After that, the goddess sighed. It was the first time she saw such a special soul. Tyron sighed regretfully. Special? How so? The souls of other creatures are fixed. Unless they have a miraculous encounter, their soul capacity will only decrease most of the time. But your soul seems to be able to increase or decrease at will. As long as the core of your soul is not damaged, you can even revive like a demigod. Yes. A mortal who has the chance to come back from the dead like a demigod. Duque's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly smiled bitterly. He didn't expect it to be like this. Coincidentally, his greatest secret came from his most special soul. Having such a soul is a blessing from the heavens for magic cultivation. The fact that you've reached the Breaking Dawn realm at such a young age proves this point. But Tyron touched her flat abdomen through her mooncloth priestess dress. A woman's stomach can give birth to life, but it still requires the soul seeds of both parents to be planted in it. Only then can a complete new life be born. Du Mao was dumbfounded. Whether it's me or the other lovers you've met before, the strength of our souls is pretty good. Unfortunately, it's not strong enough to bear your soul seed. That's why I'm willing to be your lover, not your wife. Tyrant hugged Duque tenderly. Is that so? Duque was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. There was a faint bitter smile on Tyrant's pure face. Of course it's true. Didn't you see that our goddess had no choice but to give herself to Lord Malorn? Only the strongest demigod can barely become the partner of a true god. Back then, our goddess had forcefully suppressed her own power to give birth to the demigod Cenarius. On the other hand, if you can become a demigod, you might be able to control and suppress the power of your own soul, and give us a child. Duque's heart was in turmoil. Damn, there's actually such a thing. It was very mysterious and very nonsensical, but Duque's intuition told him that it was all true. Duque secretly asked the system elf, and received a similar feeling. My apologies. Ever since you became a radiant moon wizard, your soul power has far surpassed that of a woman in the hero domain. I had no choice but to forbid you from leaking your soul power. Otherwise, every time you use your divine sword, you'll instantly give your opponent 100 radiant moon, Breaking Dawn level, spirit blast. If you want to take someone's life, I can help you open the door to your soul. Duque was also helpless when this matter was brought up. But deep down, Duque didn't want to suppress his power to give birth like Elun. Which father didn't want their offspring to surpass their parents? Look! The demigod Cenarius sounded very cool, didn't it? Grandpa Roar could kill him with one chop of his axe. In the ancient war, although the wild boar gods and bear gods weren't as weak as trash, they weren't strong enough. They were almost wiped out by the Burning Legion at their peak. At this thought, Duque let out a turbid breath. It seemed that he had to break through the Breaking Dawn level and become a demigod as soon as possible. At the demigod level, he would at least have a true immortal body. For example, White Stag Malorn. After he died in the ancient war, Elun didn't even cry, because Malorn didn't really die. Another example was Medivh, who was said to have died in Karazhan. When the Calamity army arrived, his mother made a move, and immediately believed in Brother Spring and revived on the spot. Pursuing immortality? It seems that I'm still a normal person. While Duque was mocking himself, he suddenly felt waves of spatial fluctuations. Tyron's expression darkened. Your lovers really do send people to keep an eye on me 24/7. I wanted to monopolize you for a few more days. Duque rubbed his forehead and thought, they're already giving you a lot of face. Otherwise, they would have attacked you immediately. How could they wait for more than a day? You've already made such a big commotion with Starfall, how can you hide it from them? Dark Portal, Year 20, December 25th, many Alliance queens and important figures suddenly visited Teldrassil. Seeing Chandri's stuttering as she sent a message saying that the Alliance queens had suddenly arrived, Tyrant elegantly let go of Duque's hand, tidied up her clothes, and smiled. Let them in. The door opened, and Sylvanas, who couldn't hold herself back, was the first to rush in. She pressed Duque down and kissed him passionately. Elusia and the rest surrounded Duke gently, waiting for Sylvanas to finish venting his feelings before going up to him. Only Aurelia walked over and extended her right hand to Tyrant. Should I say, welcome? Tyrant smiled like a flower. Time travel is a terrible thing, but this is good. At least in the calendar, I'm Duque's first woman. Aurelia rolled her eyes. Chapter 1086. Just then, Jaina walked over and teased, I wonder which high priest said that he was only poisoned and then saved by a guy called Dukong? Tyrant leaned over and whispered into Jaina's ear, are you going to admit to a stranger that you don't know well that you were taken captive on the battlefield, and that you lost both your body and mind, only to find out that he was the strongest traitor in the Burning Legion, and that you turned the tides and became a great hero? You didn't lose anything, and you even received the approval and blessings of your goddess? Tyrant's matter had been thoroughly investigated by Vanessa after she returned. All the women in Duque's harem knew about it. Even though they knew, they still felt that it was very mysterious. The leaders of the allied nations that had no interaction with each other before the Battle of Mount Hyjal had already been taken care of by their own men in the future. Just thinking about it made their heads burn. Aurelia wasn't angry at all. Instead, she smiled and asked, why didn't you confirm it before the Battle of Mount Hyjal? Tyrant shook her head. The great hero I know, Dukong, is a superhero who has the blessing of the moon goddess Elun and the blessing of the life-giver. During the Battle of Seamount and Mountain, Duque didn't have these two blessings. So that's how it is. Alright, sisters. Sylvanas finally finished eating and pulled up Duque, whose upper body was covered in lipstick marks. Since that bastard Duque is finally willing to return from the River of Time, let's celebrate. Aurelia, Sasha, Elusia, Jaina, and Tyrant all raised their hands in excitement. Oh, hooray! Duque, don't think that just one more vote is enough. Accept your fate. Seeing the excited harem, Duque was embarrassed. All right. Luckily, I have Alexstrasza's blessing. If the Red Dragon Queen knew that Duque used her blessing like this, would Duque be beaten to death? This could also be considered as some kind of happy trouble. On that day, it was rumored that someone had seen a few sexy Christmas girls at the gushing spring lake going in and out of the place where Duque was staying. There was even a general of a certain sentinel troop who claimed that he saw his beloved adoptive mother wrapping a red ribbon around him, treating him as some kind of Christmas present and putting him into a big Christmas gift box. Of course, a certain someone seemed to have been forced by a certain high priest to swear that he had never said such a thing. All the trifles were tidbits of news, not worth mentioning. There was only one piece of news that swept across the entire Alliance and Horde in the shortest time possible. The great hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, who had saved the world many times, had finally returned from the River of Time. On the same day, the Night Elves reached an agreement with the Alliance and announced that they would join the Alliance. After receiving the news, Thrall, who was patrolling Orgrimmar's Valley of Power, suddenly smiled bitterly. Should I say, as expected of Duke Marcus? Beside him, Grom, whose hair had already turned white, suddenly said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's him. Unfortunately, he's not from the tribe. Indeed. Thrall didn't even need to open the map to know how disadvantageous it would be for the Horde if the Night Elves joined the Alliance. Grey Valley itself was the traditional territory of the Night Elves. Even if his subordinates yelled, if the elves don't want to give us more wood, we'll get it ourselves. Thrall had never thought of waging war with the elves. The elves were not a weak race. Even if they lost 100,000 troops in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, the elves were still very powerful, and it was impossible to win without the strength of the entire horde. Moreover, the elves' nest had already been moved to the giant island of Teldrassil. Even if the horde could occupy Grey Valley, they would not be able to completely dominate the entire continent of Kalimdor. This was because the Black Coast to the northwest of Kalimdor had an extremely long and complicated coastline, and the elven fleet could land on any part of the coast. The horde's navy was completely absent. Sigh. Thrall let out a long sigh. He knew that if Duque sacrificed himself, it would be for the world of Azeroth, but the reproduction and survival of a race was such a cruel thing. If a race or an organization wanted to survive and develop, they would need more living space and more resources. Without Duque, the alliance would be like a plate of loose sand. William, that little brat, would not be able to support such a large alliance, let alone deal with the incomparably complicated internal situation of the alliance. As long as the Night Elves did not join the alliance, Thrall was confident that he could make use of the orc's strong reproductive ability, and use at most 2 generations of 30 years to make the horde the overlord of Kalimdor. It was a pity that the person he did not want to see the most had returned. At first, he did not feel it, but now it seemed that Duque's plan was extremely incisive. When he first opened up Duroder, he did not think too much about it. Later, he found out that the alliance had opened up Theramore City in the southern part of Duroder. Now that the Night Elves had joined the alliance, it was tantamount to a pincer attack on Orgrimmar from the north and south. This was quite detrimental to the development of the horde. Once, the goblins had mentioned to him that they wanted Azhara's land. If Duque was not here, it might have been possible. But now that Duque was here, the horde would not have a chance. It had only been 5 years since the orcs came to Kalimdor. The group of refugee children had just grown up, which allowed the horde's military strength to recover to a little more than 100,000. With the technical support of the goblins, the horde's military strength had greatly increased. Unfortunately, they were still no match for the alliance. It was because he had fought alongside the alliance that Thrall clearly understood what kind of monster the alliance was now. They could easily mobilize more than 1 million regular soldiers, and all the youths had to undergo strict military training. In fact, the alliance had more than 3 million reserve soldiers. Moreover, the battle at Mount Hyjal had proven that the alliance had the terrifying ability to quickly transport more than 100,000 troops across the sea. With the Burning Legion and the Scourge Army as a common enemy, the alliance was, of course, happy to cooperate with the horde. However, after losing the common goal, the conflict between the two sides would definitely be triggered again due to territorial disputes and other issues. After all, no one had forgotten the hatred of the past. The previous generation of alliance warriors had all become generals, and they had not forgotten the wanton massacre of the old horde on the Eastern Kingdom. Similarly, the horde had not forgotten the days when they were enslaved by the alliance. This hatred would not be so easily resolved. It was very likely that there would be a war between the alliance and the horde in the future. Thinking of this, Thrall felt a little suffocated. He turned to inform Varrock, "Tell Anastrian that I agree to meet him in secret. He can choose the location, but it cannot be too far from the horde's territory." Chapter 1087. Grom was a little surprised. "You want to use those bones?" Thrall didn't care. Ever since the battle at the Dark Portal, the horde has been using the Death Knight tradition, hasn't it? Orgrim did it, and so did the former chief, Zul. Grom shook his head. "I mean, aren't you afraid of angering the alliance?" Thrall smiled. "That's why it's a secret meeting. As long as the alliance doesn't declare war on the horde, the Forgotten Ones won't join the horde." Grom sighed. You've really matured. Thrall still had a difficult childhood in this life. Whether it was his career as a gladiator, Orgrim's teachings, or the experience of leading his people west to the Endless Sea, Thrall had trained him well. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if Varian hadn't gone missing in this life, he would have been completely defeated by Thrall. After becoming the leader of the Horde for 5 years, Thrall had become more mature and far-sighted. The rarest thing was that Thrall, who was making the Horde rise again, was only 20 years old. The people of the Horde didn't doubt that Thrall could lead the Horde for at least another 30 years. Thrall looked to the east. The Horde has fallen far behind the Alliance. I hope that the disaster at the Burning Steppes can hold the Alliance back. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that other than a certain cheating transmigrator, the Horde knew the disaster that the Alliance had caused. That was because the ones who led the trouble at the Blackrock Mountain were the 2 sons of the first chief, Red Blackhand and Mane Blackhand. Thrall had originally lamented that the Alliance had completely dominated the Eastern Kingdom and was far stronger than the Horde. Now that he received this news, Thrall only wanted to laugh. The location of the Burning Steppes was too important. It was located in the core area of the southern continent, but the geographical conditions were extremely harsh. There was lava and volcanic ash everywhere, and it wasn't a place for humans to live. Other than the Blackrock Orcs and Black Iron Dwarves who were naturally resistant to fire, no other race could live well there. Even Thrall would have a headache if he were to occupy a place like the Blackrock Mountain. At this time, Thrall still had the mentality of watching a show. If he knew who the real master of the Blackrock Spire was and what was under the Blackrock Mountain, his attitude might be a little different. The Dark Portal, December 28, 2020. Even in the warmer Stormwind, it was still a world of ice and snow. Winter was the time when all things withered. Winter was also the time when people who had worked hard for a year could enjoy the fireplace in their warm homes and enjoy the harvest of the year. Thanks to Duque's valuable thoughts on internal affairs, the current Stormwind was far better than the Stormwind in history, where people struggled in hardship. From west to east, there was a railway that ran through the entire kingdom. The wheat in the western wilderness could be harvested today, and the day after, it could be transported across the entire elven forest along the railroad, bypassing the Reedridge Mountains and passing through the Swamp of Sorrows to the Watchtower in the Cursed Land. From north to south, there was a subway from Ironforge to Stormwind City. From Stormwind City to Goldflash Town, all the way south through the Twilight Forest, a new railway was being built. Currently, the southernmost end of the railway had reached Crow Ridge. In another 2 years, this north-south railway would reach Stranglethorn Vale. Even though the railway was only half open, a steady stream of weapons and supplies was still being sent through the railway to the Expeditionary Army in Stormwind to develop Stranglethorn Vale. Now, the area around the Horde's Grom High Camp, including the Baral and Zakunda ruins, had officially become Stormwind's territory. The entire kingdom was talking about the troll ornaments and gold tools that had been plundered from the Troll Empire's ruins. With the addition of the Reedridge Mountains, the Swamp of Sorrows and the Upwind Path under Duque's control, Stormwind's territory was more than 3 times larger than it was in history. The prosperous situation made every citizen smile from ear to ear. At the same time, it also bred corruption. With the economy doing well, the Lords of Stormwind could practically lie down at home and still earn money every day. Gradually, the new generation of nobles forgot the humiliation of losing their territories and the grief of losing their loved ones, and began to indulge in pleasure. On the 28th, the important ministers of Stormwind gathered at the new Stormwind stronghold. This was because they were going to discuss the next year's important matters. Every year, major events of Stormwind would be discussed in winter and carried out in the spring of the next year. Luxurious carriages were parked in front of the even more majestic Stormwind stronghold's gate. Many nobles, even if they were just there to listen, were dressed to the nines. Since 2 years ago, they had formed a habit of waiting at the gate of the stronghold for her to appear. She did not disappoint them, and she came. Two pure black horses without a single strand of hair on them pulled a black carriage with golden edges and slowly drove into the square in front of the fortress. A peerless beauty stepped out of the carriage with the help of a marquis. She had long black hair that fell to her shoulders, soft and smooth. She seemed to have been carved by a craftsman in imitation of a goddess, and she had the most charming smile on her face. She wore a purple shirt with silver edges and a diamond-shaped hollowness in the middle of her chest, showing off her seemingly bottomless cleavage. She wore a bright red floor-length dress. Just her appearance alone caused a wave of low exclamations of admiration. For dozens of nobles to wait, those who did not know might have thought that there was a queen in Stormwind, and they were waiting for the queen to arrive with a posture of worship. Unfortunately, she was not a queen. She was just a countess, Countess Katrana Anristo, the illegitimate daughter of an old Stormwind noble. In fact, that noble had already been annihilated at sea during the retreat of Stormwind City in the first year of the Dark Portal. But she had enough documents to prove her identity, and with the most elegant speech and wisdom, she conquered the entire Stormwind noble circle in a short span of 3 years. If it wasn't for Duke's precedent, her rise to fame would have been a legend. Not only did she have amazing social skills, but she was also extremely outstanding in internal affairs. After Wuxia ran off to become Alterax's queen, Bolvar had no choice but to accept the fact that this woman had snatched the power of internal affairs. Bolvar was an excellent regent, he was impeccable in terms of strength, virtue, and loyalty. Unfortunately, there was only one person in the world like Duque, who could even cross realms. His talent was all in military affairs. Originally, the next year's Internal Affairs Conference would still be the same as the past 2 years, with Katrana's words being in charge. This was because no one could refute her in the field of internal affairs. Today, the atmosphere seemed a little different. The nobles realized that beside the silly William, there was not only Bolvar's regent chair, but also a very mage-style chair. Suddenly, the ceremonial officer announced, "The Grand Duke of Stormwind, His Excellency Duke Marcus, has arrived." Chapter 1088. Every Stormwind nobleman gasped in shock. This was the Stormwind Kingdom, the strongest human kingdom in the entire Eastern Kingdom. 20 years ago, the Stormwind Kingdom had been destroyed in the first battle of the Dark Portal. However, the fallen Stormwind Kingdom was miraculously recovered, and it took more than 10 years to rise again, becoming one of the most outstanding human kingdoms. Even the oldest human kingdom, Lordaeron, could not compare to Stormwind. Due to the plague of the Scourge, and the loss of a large number of people in the war, the once powerful Lordaeron was now just a second-rate kingdom. On the other hand, Stormwind was able to thwart the infiltration and conspiracy of the Cursed Church during the third battle of the Dark Portal due to Duque's prior arrangements. They managed to avoid the plague that broke out in the northern continent. Moreover, when Lordaeron fell, Stormwind took in a large number of refugees and invested them in the development of Stranglethorn Vale and the Swamp of Sorrows. Even after the war ended, those who stayed were given land. Queen Kalia of Lordaeron did not force her people to return. Overall, Stormwind's national strength did not decline. The previous king, Lang, was undoubtedly an excellent king, but that was all. Compared to his two incomparably dazzling and inescapable subjects, Ryan was just a mediocre person. Anduin Lothar, the leader of the Stormwind Royal Guards, the leader of the Iron Horse Brotherhood, the first commander of the Alliance, the strongest human warrior, and the last confirmed direct descendant of Thoradin the Great. His life could be said to be legendary. He had participated in the killing of the demon king Sargeras, who had possessed Mediva's body, killed the first chief of the Horde, fought head-on against Grom Hellscream, who had killed many famous Alliance knights in the Silverpine Forest, and led the charge in the Battle of the Scorching Plains when his side was at a disadvantage. His heroic story could be said for 3 days and 3 nights. Lothar was a model of chivalry. He was worshipped by countless knights and was destined to be sung for thousands of years. However, there was another person who was more famous than Lothar. That was Duke Marcus, the uncrowned king. On the military front, Duque had personally pierced through the chest of Medivh, who was possessed by Sargeras. He commanded the weak army of Stormwind to set fire to the 200,000 Horde soldiers. He miraculously saved 50,000 Stormwind elites on the floating ice island, and was appointed as the Alliance's vice-commander before the age of 20. After that, he led the army to fight for thousands of miles, from the Battle of Southshore where the sea was dyed red, to the Eagle Nest Mountain, to the northernmost Kuil Salis on the mainland, to the siege of the Horde in Rotterdam, and finally to the decisive battle on the scorching plains that made the name of the Lightning War resound in both heaven and hell. When the Horde's third-generation chief, Nuth-Azul, led the army to counterattack, it was his watchtower defense line that defeated the Horde's ferocious counterattack. During the Third Battle of the Dark Portal, he led the alliance and defeated the main force of the Calamity Army in one fell swoop. In the end, the Calamity Army that had swept the Rotterdam Kingdom, the Dalajan Kingdom, the Rapids Castle Kingdom, and the Kuil Salis Kingdom was expelled from the Rotterdam Kingdom. What followed was the Battle of Mount Hyjal that almost destroyed the entire world of Azeroth. It was no exaggeration to say that in the field of military affairs, Duke Marcus was the god of war. Just based on this battle record alone, it was enough for Duque to be praised for thousands of years. But it was more than that. In the field of civil affairs, Duque was the greatest inventor and reformer. The new seeding technology, the mold-based construction of houses, the development of the marine economy in combination with the Murloc Nagas, the medical security system, the 6-year compulsory education, the economic construction of the Belt and Road Railway, and the continental integrated economic model that linked all railway and sea transportation. Many of his views and new ideas were fiercely opposed by countless people at the beginning. He used his unique vision and charisma to promote all of this in an almost tyrannical way. Time proved that everything he did and every policy he promulgated was correct. That was how the Stormwind, which had been completely destroyed by the war, was pulled into the Stormwind, which was extremely rich in resources today. His territory was already larger than the Stormwind, and even larger than many small countries. Rumors of his flirtatious exploits with several queens were spreading everywhere. No, it was no longer rumors. At least the 3 queens of Kurtiras, Lordaeron, and Alterac publicly announced that the person they loved was Duque. As long as Duque was willing, he would not hesitate to change the surname of the royal family to Marcus. However, Duque chose to be loyal, and like the other lords in the kingdom, he fulfilled his obligations as a vassal to the king of Stormwind. There was such a standard in the noble circle that was recognized all over the world. As long as a vassal paid taxes to the king on time and sent troops according to the strength of the territory during the war, he was a perfect vassal. Obviously, Duque's Marcus family did this impeccably. Therefore, for the nobles, Duque was also the embodiment of loyalty. Originally, it was said that Duque almost died because he was cursed in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, and after he recovered, he participated in the secret mission of the Dragon of Time, Nozdormu, and was likely to die in the River of Time. Suddenly, there was news that he had returned. After all, Duque was a legend among legends, a living legend. The nobles had mixed feelings. They coveted the benefits brought by Duque, but they also did not want Duque to return, because the return of such a powerful Grand Duke was bound to reshuffle the power of the entire kingdom. Compared to Duque, even Bolvar Fordragon, the regent, had to step aside. As the ceremonial officer finished the roll call, an archmage dressed in a dazzling epic mage equipment appeared at the door of the conference hall. Every single piece of equipment on his body emitted a strong magical wave visible to the naked eye. Even though he had repeatedly suppressed the magical power of the equipment, the flowing light and vibrant colors still overshadowed the jewelry worn by the nobles. Half a step behind Duque were 2 vassals of Duque, Earl Edwin van Cleve and Earl Reginald Windsor. Behind them were 2 beautiful women dressed in maid clothes, and one of them was an elf. Those who knew the inside story, of course, knew that one was Van Cleve's daughter, Vanessa, and the other was the former follower of Prince Kuel Salas, Solarian. Not to mention the two important ministers signing autographs, even the maids were heroic domain masters or radiant moon mages. Only Duque could be so extravagant. Every noble, whether marquis or dukes, bowed their heads in respect. Duque strode forward, but stopped in front of a beautiful, black-haired female noble. "Hello. Beautiful lady, may I, Duke Marcus, have the honor to know your name?" "Hello. Your Excellency Duke Marcus, I am Countess Katrana and Risto." Katrana performed a very standard and elegant ladylike bow. "Very good. I'll remember you." A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Chapter 1089. Remember you? The entire meeting hall was instantly filled with a low and rude commotion. No one cared about this little bit of impoliteness. To many nobles, this was definitely something that the Countess of Enristo could be proud of. Just like the epic achievements of the legendary hero, Duke Marcus, in the aristocratic circle and even the commoners' daily conversations, if a lady was fancied by Duke, it could be regarded as a glory that could be bragged about for a lifetime. Once upon a time, because countless noble ladies had tried to climb into Duque's bed when he was just an ordinary noble, many nobles envied and hated Duque and slandered Duque's sexual orientation. Later, as Duque's female friends were exposed one by one, this group of nobles who were gossipy to death immediately changed the topic, and boasted that only women who could catch Duque's eye were the true top beauties in the world. Just look, Jaina, Elucia, Kalia, the three Windrunner sisters, all those who were related to Duque were all famous super beauties. Suddenly, Duque expressed interest in this new noble lady who had recently appeared in the circle of nobles in Stormwind. The noble's soul of gossip was burning. The female nobles were envious. The male nobles were pounding their chests and stamping their feet because they felt that they had no advantage in front of the great hero and Grand Duke Duque. Apart from boasting that they had a slight advantage in terms of appearance, they all lost by a wide margin. Alright, this was just a small interlude. Although Bolvar, who had long been standing beside William, frowned at Duque's somewhat frivolous behavior, it did not matter. What happened next was the key. This was because the person Duque wanted to see was the King of Stormwind. This scene made many of the royal faction rather nervous because Duque's power was too great. King Lang had ridden more than one wool before the war, appointing Anduin and Duque as regents for the young princes. The power of these two regents was beyond the imagination of outsiders. Anduin is my arm, and Duque is my brain. I trust them more than I trust myself. So, if they believe that my son does not have the right to be king, then they can choose another descendant of mine. If my bloodline is severed, then they have the right to hand over Stormwind to a more suitable person. They had the power to veto the Storm King. The power of these two regents was astonishing. What was even rarer was the fact that he had obtained the unanimous approval of King and Queen Lang, as well as the approval of the high-ranking nobles of Stormwind. At the end of the day, even Bolvar's position as the regent was actually given to him by Anduin. Obviously, even though they were both old Storm nobles, Bolvar's prestige was far inferior to Anduin's. The most obvious example was that Varian's son was named Anduin Rin. And after this little prince was baptized in the Church of Holy Light, his Christian name was impressively Duma, the first two words of Duke Marcus. Bolvar was also rather nervous now, because William. After his disappearance, he had become muddle-headed, just like a puppet. It was obvious that William was not suitable to be a king in such a state. If Duque announced that he was no longer a king, then Bolvar really could not find a reason to object. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Duque continued to move forward and arrived in front of the statue-like William, who was sitting foolishly on the throne. Seeing the beads of sweat on Bolvar's forehead, Duque smiled calmly. Phew! This smile made Bolvar, who represented the knights, secretly heave a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, Duque did not kneel down on one knee or even bow. Instead, he bowed to Queen Tiffany, who was sitting on the throne beside William. This is, after bowing, Duque raised his head and said in a clear voice, "My apologies. I will not bow to a soulless body." Queen Tiffany's face instantly turned pale. "William is just sick." The Queen, who was supposed to have died in the riot of the Mason Brotherhood, was still fine because Van Cleef had followed Duque and Stormwind was not as chaotic as in history. Duque shook his head and said loudly so that all the nobles could hear, "No. This is not a sickness. His Majesty William Rhin's soul is not in his body." Ah! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The commotion among the nobles could not be suppressed. After his disappearance and recovery, William had been like a fool. Almost all the nobles thought that William had been hit in the head and was suffering from a concussion. Who knew that Duque would publicly say that William's soul was no longer in his body? If someone else had said this, there would definitely have been a lot of doubts. However, Duque was the strongest person in the realm of mystery. What's going on? Bolvar was very agitated. He stepped forward and almost wanted to grab Duque's shirt to ask. Everyone knew that William's disappearance had nothing to do with Duque. At that time, everyone knew that Duque had gone to participate in Nozdormu's secret mission. However, Duque suddenly said that William's soul was no longer in his body. This was obviously a huge conspiracy. Duque shook his head. "I don't know. But I can confirm that this is a type of evil magic. The Burning Legion or the Calamity Legion?" Bolvar lost his voice. "No. If I have to say what it is, I'm afraid it's more like the methods of the ancient gods." "Then, don't worry, Bolvar. I have never thought of abolishing His Majesty William Rhin. Because..." Suddenly, Duque's aura became very mysterious, and a torturous aura surged out. "When I was floating in the river of time, I saw a fragment of William's glorious future. F***ck. Was it that ridiculous? He even saw the future?" Alright, in theory, Duque had inherited it from Medivh. Medivh had already warned the various countries before the arrival of the Calamity Legion, which once again proved that Medivh was a torturous, no, a prophet. Now that Duque actually said that William would be very powerful, it was really hard for everyone to refute him. Duque turned his head and faced a large group of nobles. He raised his hands high and said, "I have always believed that humans are not born noble. If bloodline determines everything, then the great Anduin Lothar should be the ruler of the 7 human countries, and not choose to end his own bloodline." Duque's sudden statement caught the nobles off guard. Everyone was wondering what Duque was trying to do. Duque continued, "Whether a person is noble or not depends on his actions. Therefore, I think that His Majesty William, who has always been committed to building a better country and doing his best for the alliance, is a competent king. Therefore, as the subjects of His Majesty, what we have to do is to build a greater country in Stormwind when His Majesty is not around." Chapter 1090. If Duque deposed the king from the start, it would undoubtedly maximize the effect of establishing dominance, but it would also bring about another consequence, the division of power in Stormwind. Even if Duque put Anduin Rhin on the throne, there would still be suspicions of narrowing the emperor to order his vassals. If he maintained the status quo, it would not disturb the core knights of Stormwind, nor would it alarm someone. With Duque being so easy to talk to, those guys who were ready to make trouble had no choice but to stop. After all, with Duque's identity and status, with such a huge foundation and the support of external forces, even if Duque told the Rhin family to get lost and he himself became the king of Stormwind, it would not be surprising. Duque was advancing by retreating. Since he had given up on the most crucial issue of royal power, he would definitely reap the benefits in other areas. This was something that the nobles with a little political knowledge would understand. But no one would have thought that Duque's next bombshell would be so shocking. Like the most passionate speaker, Duque's hands were raised high like a conductor of an orchestra, stirring the heartstrings of the nobles. Everyone. Are you satisfied? Satisfied? Satisfied with what? Living in a castle that looks magnificent on the outside, but is actually built on quicksand, enjoying prosperity that can be destroyed at any time, and the taxes of your subjects, even if you will die in a few years. Even so, are you satisfied? What? Destroy? Again. Most of the nobles' faces were covered with makeup, but now, under the heavy makeup, their faces were as pale as they looked. Die? Die? No. Of course not. Death and the loss of inheritance were almost the things that the nobles feared the most. After experiencing 3 battles at the Dark Portal, is there anyone who still dreams of eternal peace? If there is, then let me give you a word of advice: don't be naive. The demons of the Burning Legion have already set their eyes on this beautiful planet. There may be peace, but every subsequent peace will be extremely short. If you do not wish to be destroyed, then bring out your drive, bring out your dignity as a noble, and prepare for war. War? Where is the enemy? As the leader of the knights, Bolvar stood up without hesitation. Duque waved his hand to stop Bolvar. No. There's no rush. This time, I'm here to tell everyone that the era of nobles being able to watch the soldiers fight on the front line as if it had nothing to do with them as long as they send soldiers and pay them is over, while they safely have a party in the rear is over. When Duque said this, all the nobles in the meeting hall felt their hearts skip a beat. Obviously, Duque was going to use his ultimate move. I hereby formally request Stormwind to reform the tax system. In the future, all tax officials will be dispatched by the kingdom. Taxes are divided into national tax and local tax in proportion. The national tax would be paid directly to the state and controlled by the state. The land tax was collected by the lord and used for the lord's daily expenses as well as the construction of the territory. At the same time, all entrance fees and road tolls will be abolished. In terms of military affairs, greatly reduce the number of private soldiers that nobles can legally possess. Grand dukes can only have 1,000 soldiers at most, and so on. The disbanded soldiers and those who pass the physical examination will all be incorporated into the country's regular army. The rest will be reorganized into local garrisons and supported by the country's finance. In terms of armaments, all mines will be uniformly mined by the country. Every year, a guide price will be set based on the market price and economic returns will be given to the lords. At the same time, the lords have the obligation to allocate empty land near the main roads for the country to build various military facilities according to local conditions. In one breath, Duque threw out a combination of punches, directly shocking the nobles to the point of suffering internal injuries. All the nobles felt like they were about to faint. This was digging out the roots of the nobles. In name, taxes did not increase, but which nobles did not have their own private coffers? Every year, the taxes would be 10,000 gold coins. At most, they would report 3,000 gold coins, and then pay 3,000 as taxes to the king. Now that even the tax officials had been changed to the countries, that private coffer would be the first to be destroyed. In terms of military affairs, abolishing the private soldier system was equivalent to abolishing military power. In the future, any family's soldiers would only be at the level of a guard of honor and would not even be qualified to rebel. In terms of armaments, the nobles who occupied the mountains as kings were forced into a dead end. In the past, those who had mines in their territories were like hens that laid golden eggs, practically earning money while lying down. There were even lords who secretly refined the mines themselves, forged them into weapons, and secretly sold them to the tribes. Now, no one could play any tricks. With such a reform, nominally, the territories still belonged to the lords, but there would be no profits or autonomy. This was simply the biggest subversion of the aristocratic system. A marquis named Lionali exclaimed on the spot, "No. Even you, Grand Duke Marcus, do not have the right to announce the abolition of the aristocratic fiefdoms. This is the aristocratic norm set by Thoradin the Great. This is the cornerstone of the entire aristocratic world." Duque did not answer directly, but instead smiled strangely. "Sir Marquis, have you ever seen a big explosion that almost destroyed the world?" No, I have seen it. I just went to the ancient war 10,000 years ago and saw how the ancient Kalimdor continent exploding into today's Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdom continent. Do you want me to show you some magic images? Although he said no, in fact, Duque had already started to show them with a wave of his hand. Well, I'm sorry to inform you that there will be similar catastrophes in the near future. Sir Marquis, even if Stormwind City is likely to be engulfed by lava, do you still want to tell me that the rules set by Thoradin the Great, which destroyed the Empire 2,000 years ago, cannot be changed? Even if the Lava Lord Ragnaros, who is sleeping in the burning steppes, is about to awaken and turn the entire southern continent into a sea of fire purgatory, do you still dare to say that it has nothing to do with us? The aristocrats' faces turned green, but they did not know how to refute. Duque's voice suddenly rose by an octave. "Everyone. The times have changed. Relying on the contributions of our ancestors to enjoy the glory and splendor for 1,000 years is bound to be a dream. In the past 20 years, I, His Majesty Lang Rin, and His Excellency Anjuin Lothar have done so much for this country, carried out so many reforms, and built Stormwind City so strong together with everyone, not to give you the capital to be corrupt." "Corrupt, is it?" Bolvar suddenly laughed bitterly. The kingdom had become extravagant, and it was not that he did not notice this change. But as a great aristocrat, he could not stop the aristocrats from indulging in gold every day, living the same luxurious life as before. It was only at this moment that he realized how great Duque's reforms were. The world is facing destruction. We do not need vermin. Aristocrats who claim to be the elites of the kingdom. You have no choice. Either you keep up with the changes of the times, or you fall behind. At this point, Duque's face revealed a murderous look. "Of course. You can object. As long as you throw away the noble insignia on your chest and walk out of this door, your objection will take effect immediately." Chapter 1091. The nobles were shocked. They couldn't believe their ears. Duque, who had been missing for a long time, came back with drastic reforms and targeted at the roots of the nobles. Were the nobles still nobles without financial and military power? What right did the nobles have to do whatever they wanted in their own territories? Wasn't it just financial and military power? Almost all the respect and power were obtained from these two things. Now, without even informing them, he directly said that he would take back their power. This was killing them. They almost wanted to rebel on the spot. Unfortunately, no one dared. Compared to a peerless expert who killed the demon king Sargeras and the demon commander Archimond, they were practically trash. All the nobles' military power combined couldn't even defeat one of Duque's fingers. If it was 20 years ago, when the nobles of the 7 human kingdoms were united, they might be able to summon external forces and teach Duque a lesson for daring to challenge the rules of the nobles' game. Unfortunately, when the Storm nobles suddenly thought about it, their mouths were filled with bitterness, as if they had been forced to eat sh*t. Unknowingly, the world of the nobles had already collapsed from one disaster after another. Among the 7 human kingdoms, Stormguard had already been destroyed and had yet to recover. Dalajan had a completely different system. By the way, the current chairman, Ronan, was Duque's personal disciple. Gilnas was still surrounded by a group of werewolves, and no one knew if his kingdom had been destroyed. Apart from Stormwind, the nobles of the remaining 3 countries were basically wiped out. Alterac, after the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Horde conquered Broken Ridge, and even the nobles including Eden Piraeus were wiped out. Only Duque's bloodline was left. Although Elusia ascended to the throne, the old Duke Berev still stayed in the Marcus family's territory. The entire family and even the kingdom were in cahoots with Duque. Lordaeron, after Arthas's betrayal, the core nobles of Lordaeron were all wiped out. Only staunch local lords like Mograine were left, but they were all the most loyal knights. Kurtiras, during the third battle of the Dark Portal, the entire mainland fell, and all the nobles were wiped out. Only Queen Jaina was left. Alright, the problem was that the 3 queens mentioned above were all considered to be Duque's lovers by the nobles. Outside help? It was already good enough that Duque didn't drag the rest of the human kingdoms over to hold down the fort. How could he ask for reinforcements? Not only did they not have any external help, but they also could not defeat Duque, whose power was equivalent to that of a country's monarch. The nobles were truly aggrieved. Commotion. Both sides were embarrassed. For a moment, everyone wanted to find someone else to go against Duque. Amidst the countless, "I'm not as good as you," and "Do you think I'm an idiot?" looks, the Storm nobles realized in despair that no one could do anything to Duque. Duque didn't even take out his staff. He just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, demonstrating what it meant to be domineering with a smile. If looks could kill, then these useless nobles would have been killed on the spot, chopped up and fed to the dogs. Now, Duque was so domineering. You can object. I can ignore it. Just like that, he used an almost barbaric manner to declare his power and force. Silence. Do not erupt in silence. Die in silence. Just like that, Duque, with a silent smile, killed the nobles' will to resist. Is there anyone else who wants to object? The gate is right there. Don't worry. As the regent of Stormwind, I have no intention of confiscating the property of those who object. After handing over the territory to the country, I will allow you to sell off the property in your territory. At the same time, I will allow you to continue to do business and live within the borders of Stormwind. Duque's attitude of, "I'm giving you a gift, but you're not thanking me for it," almost drove the nobles crazy. Rage spread through every vein in their bodies, but they couldn't vent it. They were practically suffocating to the point of suffering internal injuries. Bolvar was dumbfounded at the sight. He wanted to speak a few times, and even when the nobles he was familiar with sent him pleading looks, his heart softened a little. But after squirming a few times, he didn't say anything in the end. What reverberated in his mind was what the late King Lang had said to him when he was still alive. Bolvar. Duque's reforms, with our intelligence, we can't understand them. In fact, you and I are both mortals. We don't have Anduin's courage, nor do we have Duque's intelligence. So mortals should do what mortals do. Leave the rest to them. We only need to confirm that they are doing it for the good of the kingdom and the people. That's enough. That's right. The ones who were truly valued by the late king were Duque and Anduin. I, Bolvar, am just a person who keeps what I've accomplished. Because he knew the limits of his intelligence, Bolvar's loyalty to the House of Rin ultimately overrode the interests of these nobles. Duque forcefully suppressed Bolvar and the knights, and they didn't utter a word. The resolution, which was almost a disaster for the nobles, was passed just like that. As soon as the meeting ended, Bolvar couldn't wait to summon Duque. Almost as soon as he entered the secret meeting room, Bolvar asked, "Duque, what are you trying to do? Bolvar, do you really not know, or are you just pretending? Stormwind has already decayed." Duque's expression turned cold, and he threw out a stack of petitions. "I made so many reforms to make the entire kingdom rich, not to feed those vermin." Looking at the stack of petitions, Bolvar's eyes immediately closed in pain. You won't die if you don't court death. In the past, the lords controlled their territories. Even the king had to pay tolls to the lords when he opened a railway. Now that they were used to plucking feathers from the geese, and every train had to earn a sum of money, those nobles actually joined forces to besiege him, the regent, saying that they wanted to impose special tariffs on the supply trains that passed through their territories to the Overwatch castle in the Cursed Land. Otherwise, they would stop the train every time it passed and check if there were any prohibited items. Other than that, the nobles made all sorts of noise because the land was privately owned. Bolvar, who abided by the iron law that the nobles' territories were not the king's for 2,800 years, could do nothing about it. However, he didn't think that Duque would immediately make a move upon his return. But this is too intense. This will cause the entire ruling class of the kingdom to collapse. Then let's change it to another batch. Even if we don't do anything, they will eventually perish under the enemy's attacks. The important thing now is whether we should destroy them, or let them continue to corrupt the entire kingdom, dragging the kingdom and even all of humanity into the abyss of destruction. Is it that exaggerated? What if I told you that the loss of Varian's soul was the plot of an enemy, and that enemy just so happened to be among the nobles? Bolvar's heart instantly froze. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.